Chapter 1105. The greatest taboo in the art of war was fighting at night. While it was possible to launch a sneak attack or a small-scale assault, it was not conducive to large-scale battles. If one carefully examined history, one would discover that decisive battles that took place at night were extremely rare. This was because at night, vision, perception, and the commands of the commanders would all be greatly disrupted. There were even cases of soldiers killing each other at night due to fear and chaos. There were even cases of soldiers doing the exact opposite of orders, chasing hundreds of miles out of the battlefield at night and getting lost in the enemy's hinterland. This is all we can do. The Iron Wall Army has suffered grievous losses, and it's exhausted in every aspect. It probably won't be able to pursue them. Gao Xianji sighed. This was an extremely rare opportunity, but the time was not right, and the army had suffered grievous losses. Even though he was unwilling, Gao Xianji could only give up. No matter what, Kataba will always be an obstacle. Qing Qianli sighed. If the enormous threat that was Kataba was not dealt with, the Tang dynasty would never be able to speak of victory. In a battle with an expert of this level, just the aftershocks were enough to inflict grievous losses on the exhausted Tang dynasty. Boom! With the blare of a horn, the Tang dynasty army began to recede like the receding tide. The distant Wushan cavalry, Mamelukes, Mutri Great Cavalry, and Celestial Wolf Cavalry also began to advance toward the first defense line. This battle, where they were outnumbered, had also exhausted their strength. And as the Tang dynasty retreated, the distant Arab cavalry also began to recede. The Blood Beast Army, Ironblood Army, Fearless Army, Death Army, and Tiber's army also withdrew from the battle under the cover of the darkness. Wang Chong, Gao Xianji, Qing Qianli, Wang Yan, and the evil emperor stood side by side, motionless as they looked across from them. After a long while, Wang Chong finally looked away and pulled on the reins of his horse as he rode toward the city of Talas. Order Su Ke to calculate the losses after the battle. Wang Chong said. Night quickly fell, and Su Ke's side quickly calculated the casualties. Marquis, we've suffered grievous losses in this battle. At least 40,000 were killed and 20,000 wounded. Including the Tongluo cavalry, we only have around 60,000 soldiers left that can still fight. As the sky darkened, the city of Talas was ablaze with lanterns. Su Ke was kneeling on the ground, his expression extremely solemn. Talas had originally been garrisoned with more than 110,000 soldiers, and with the Tongluo cavalry and So Yung-sun's training, it had reached 120,000. But in this single battle, more than 40,000 had been killed, more than 20,000 had been wounded, and more than half had been lost in battle. This was the price the Tang dynasty had paid in the face of the charge of hundreds of thousands of Arabs. What about the Arabs? As the lanterns flickered, Wang Chong placed his hands behind his back and looked at Su Ke. These words caused Gao Xianji, Qing Qianli, and the evil emperor to look over, expressions of concern in their eyes. We still don't have exact figures from the Arabs, but based on our initial estimates, the number of casualties should be more than 200,000, with more than 80,000 being killed by the Ballista army. Su Ke sternly said. Ever since the founding of the Tang dynasty, ballistae had been extremely lethal and intimidating in any battle. In the hands of Wang Chong and Su Hanshan, ballista tactics had taken a qualitative leap, and a large ballista army was enough to make any army tremble in fear. The surrounding officers breathed sighs of relief at Su Ke's words. This means that the Arabs, the Uzan, and the Western Turks combined only have around 260 to 70,000 soldiers left. Gao Xianji said. The Great Tang had suffered heavy losses in this battle, but the one who had suffered even more was the attacking side, Arabia. The ratio of casualties in this battle was nearly 1 to 3. For every Tang dynasty soldier killed, 3 elite Arab soldiers had been buried with them. In that case, the loss was still acceptable. Yes. Su Ke kneeled on the ground and respectfully said. The Xuanwu army suffered the most casualties, and the majority of them were caused by Qutaybah's Revelation Army. The army has lost more than 20,000 soldiers, with nearly 5,000 of the Xuanwu army dying in battle. Su Ke's words immediately caused the mood in the hall to turn heavy. The Xuanwu army had 8,000 soldiers, and they were one of the elite armies of the Tang dynasty. In a single clash, 5,000 of them had died to the Revelation Army, a grievous loss. 40,000 soldiers had died in this battle, and 20,000 of them had been killed by the Revelation Army. This made everyone feel a chill in their hearts. In addition, although the Arabs lost more than 200,000 soldiers, based on our observations, those who died in the early stages were the weaker soldiers. The remaining soldiers will only be stronger, and their main force will still exist. In the future, the Blood Beast Army, Iron Blood Army, Fearless Army, and Death Army will all pose a massive threat to us. Su Ke lowered his head as he added. Those who could survive on the cruel battlefield would always be the elite of the elite. This was an irrefutable principle. In addition, the defensive capabilities of top-class armies would always be much stronger than those of other armies. Thus, although the Death Army, Fearless Army, and Iron Blood Army had fought a fierce and cruel battle with the Tang dynasty, they had not suffered as many losses as imagined. I understand. Get up. A pensive look flickered through Wang Chang's eyes, but he quickly regained his composure and waved his hand at Su Ke. Although there were only 50,000 some soldiers left in the army, the Arabs only had 260 to 70,000 soldiers. 1 to 5 was not impossible to deal with. Of course, the most important factor was that the 50,000 soldiers of the Tang dynasty were all top-class elites, and the more than 6,000 Tang dynasty ballistae were completely undamaged. These ballistae would become the most crucial weapon for the Tang dynasty to resist the Arabs in the future. Su Hanshan, what's the situation with the ballista army? How many ballista bolts do we have left? Wang Chong turned to Su Hanshan. We used up a great deal of ballista bolts in dealing with the Arabs. Although we sent out soldiers to retrieve as many as possible from the battlefield, there aren't many left, only around 70,000 bolts. On average, each ballista can fire 14 times. The ballista bolts of the Tang dynasty were forged from the finest steel, which meant that they were extremely heavy. The more ballista bolts carried, the slower the army would be. This was a practical problem that Su Hanshan had to consider. Thus, in order to arrive at Talas as quickly as possible to reinforce Wang Chong, Su Hanshan had not brought a mountain of ballista bolts like many people had imagined. Everything had to be done according to the circumstances. But the battles with Daluan Ruozan and the Arabs had consumed many of Su Hanshan's ballista bolts. The 70,000 some ballista bolts were the result of Su Hanshan's efforts to recover them. Wang Chang's brow imperceptibly rose at Su Hanshan's words. Each ballista had 14 ballista bolts, meaning that the 5,000 ballista soldiers would have to be extremely cautious in the coming battles, calibrating every ballista bolt they fired. But as long as they used the right methods, 70,000 ballista bolts would be enough to deal a devastating blow to the Arabs. As these thoughts flitted through his mind, Wang Chong quickly turned to Chuluwu and the other Tong Luo cavalry officers. General, many thanks. Wang Chong sincerely said. Humph. There's no need to thank me. We didn't come for you. This is all an imperial decree, for the sake of the Tang dynasty. Chuluwu snorted and raised his head as he rudely declared. Everyone in the hall grimaced at this sight. Wang Chong was still one of the highest commanders of the Tang dynasty at Talas and had made great contributions to the Tang dynasty. If not for him, the Tang dynasty would have been defeated long ago. Chuluwu and these Tong Luo cavalry were far too arrogant. Marquis. Li Sai's eyes flashed with cold light, and he was just about to say something when Wang Chong stopped him. It's fine. Let them be. Wang Chong faintly smiled, unconcerned. Wang Chong naturally knew why Chuluwu was so angry. In the Kunwa training camp, Wang Chong had defeated Tong Luo Great General Abusi's son, Abu Tong, and then tied him naked to a bamboo pole in deflecting blade manner, humiliating Abu Tong and all the Tong Luo cavalry. It would have been strange if Chuluwu had been so kind to Wang Chong. But to Wang Chong, Chuluwu's personal prejudices were unimportant in this war. As long as they carried out the imperial decree and fought with all their might on the battlefield, it was enough. As these thoughts flitted through his mind, Wang Chong faintly smiled and quickly regained his composure. Chuluwu, General Wang, I don't care about your personal grudges. In this war, the Tang dynasty must win. This is His Majesty's decree, and no one is allowed to defy it. Right at this moment, a low and muffled voice that no one could clearly distinguish resounded in the hall, instantly attracting everyone's attention. Along with this voice, boom! A massive foot wrapped in thick armor stepped out from a corner. At the same time, a storm-like aura imbued with powerful darkness energy swept out and enveloped the entire hall. In an instant, everyone noticed the black-armored guard who resembled a giant spirit god, as well as the thin and ancient war flag in his hand that was red and black. The originally slightly tense atmosphere immediately relaxed a lot. Chuluwu's expression turned grave as he lowered his head. Gao Xianji, Qing Qianli, and the others also revealed respectful expressions. Even though no one recognized this black-armored guard and no one knew what kind of face he had under his monstrous armor, it was enough for them to know that he bore the seal of the Holy Emperor. In all of Talas, there was no question that this black-armored guard was an avatar of the Holy Emperor. Wang Chong, the Holy Emperor's letter has been delivered to you. Have you read it? The black-armored guard's deep and emotionless voice resounded in everyone's ears, but his gaze remained fixed on Wang Chong. Chapter 1107. Absolutely safe. Wang Chong smiled and nodded. Good. The black-armored guard's spirits were clearly roused, and his aura became much gentler. Then I'll have to trouble General. The moment he finished speaking, his attitude toward Wang Chong underwent a 180-degree transformation, his entire person becoming much more respectful. Wang Chong faintly smiled and turned his gaze to the war banner in the black-armored guard's hand. Who would have thought that His Majesty would actually send out this legendary war flag? With this war flag, everything will be completely different. I will also be able to truly display that formation. Wang Chong's mind was in turmoil as he gazed at the ancient and modeled war banner in the black-armored guard's hand. In the past, he had spent countless efforts to search for this war banner, but to no avail. Ever since the death of the Holy Emperor, this most legendary war banner of the Central Plains had disappeared, never to be found again. To Wang Chong, as well as to the Central Plains, this was a massive loss. Thus, this war banner was what Wang Chong wanted to find the most. But the Central Plains was as vast as the sea, and Wang Chong had no clue where to find it. How could it be so easy to find it? But Wang Chong had never expected that at the most crucial moment of the war banner that he had been eagerly waiting for would suddenly appear before him in such a manner. The 9-Dragon Blood War Banner. It was one of the most powerful war banners in the Central Plains. It was rumored that this war banner had originated from the era of Emperor Wu of the Han Dynasty 1,000 years ago. At the time, the renowned champion Marquis Huatsubing had led his army north to conquer the Xiongnu. Over the course of 1,000 years, the formation had been constantly modified and strengthened. By the time of Emperor Taizong's reign, it had evolved into the peerless formation renowned throughout the world, the Dragon Spear, Tiger Leopard Mount. The 9-Dragon Blood War Banner was the core of this formation. In Emperor Taizong's era, it was the most powerful magical artifact in the entire Central Plains, as well as the symbol of the highest fighting power of the Tang dynasty's army. This was the reason why Wang Chong had been so tirelessly searching for the war banner. Li Sai, pass on my order. The Dragon Stallion Army, the Divine Martial Army, the Divine Prison Army, and the Tong Luo Cavalry, have them all gather at the second training ground of Talas. General, time is of the essence. I'll have to trouble you to come along. With the last sentence, Wang Chong looked at the black-armored guard in the corner who held a flag in one hand. "General, please do as you wish." The black-armored guard took a step forward and said without hesitation. Outside Talas, between the two steel defense lines, a cold wind rustled in the stillness. One by one, the armored horsemen gathered in front of the first defense line. Even the Mo Sabre squadron was sent to the rear of the defense line. But at this moment, the second training ground of Talas was brightly lit. The Dragon Stallion Army, the Divine Martial Army, the Divine Prison Army, all the top-class armies had gathered together and were training intensely. Time was short, and there was only one day left. Wang Chong could only use his superb command skills to prepare as quickly as possible. Rumble. For the entire night, everyone was training intensely. The rumbling sounds were incessant and resounded throughout the entire city. At the same time, the Arab camp on the other side was also heavily guarded. In the fierce battle during the day, even the Revelation army had been dispatched, but it had still been defeated by the Tang dynasty, with more than 200,000 casualties. This was undoubtedly a massive blow to those who had been arrogant enough to believe that the Arabs would be the ultimate victor. After witnessing the terrifying fighting power of the Tang people, all the Arabs were on high alert. Tens of thousands of torches illuminated the Arab camp. More than 100 soldiers were patrolling the perimeter, proof that the Arabs were extremely wary of the Tang dynasty. Whoosh! There was no wind on the outermost perimeter of the Arab camp, but one of the torches suddenly flickered, its flame shrinking as if someone had blown on it. A group of Arab patrolling soldiers suddenly widened their eyes at this sight and began to slow down. "It's too cold. Even the torches are beginning to be affected. What's going on here? It feels so cold tonight." Based on normal circumstances, it should have been at least 2 more months before it started snowing, but now, it felt even colder than snow. A group of Arabs suddenly said as they watched the flames change. The change in the weather had actually begun several days ago, but for some reason, the temperature had been changing more and more, and it was getting colder and colder. "Raphael, look at your armor." An Arab horseman suddenly noticed something and pointed at a horseman, his voice brimming with shock. These words immediately attracted everyone's attention, and all the Arab horsemen around the torches turned to look at Raphael. In the gloomy darkness, no one had noticed anything at the start, but with the help of the torches, they could clearly see that a layer of silver-white crystals had formed on Raphael's armor. Frost! Everyone cried out in alarm at the sight of this thin layer of crystal. At almost the same time, they also realized that their armor had been covered in a layer of frost, and cold energy was seeping through their armor like needles into their bodies. These elite Arab horsemen actually felt a slight chill. The Arab horsemen glanced at each other, speechless for a long time. At this moment, a completely different scene was taking place in the center of the Arab camp. "Bastards! A bunch of useless things. You actually lost to an Eastern infidel cavalry. What a disgrace!" Ibak's furious roars echoed through the tent, and even the curtains around the tent began to tremble. One could easily imagine just how furious Ibak was. On the battlefield, Ibak had not expressed his anger before the battle was over, but now that the battle of the day had come to an end, Ibak could no longer endure it. The invincible Mamelukes of Arabia, aided by the high priest's meteoric star medal and the pharaoh halo, had lost to the Wuxian cavalry of the Tang dynasty in a single clash. Even in death, Ibak would never have dared to believe such a thing. The Mameluk's golden body of invincibility had been completely shattered. This was an enormous humiliation for both Arabia and the Mamelukes. "Milord, my apologies. We were careless. We did not expect them to use such a crafty scheme against us." In the tent, the heads of Faisal and several other Mamluk officers plunged into the ground like ostriches. They naturally knew that they had lost this battle, but the sudden appearance of 4,000 cavalry from the rear of the Wuxian cavalry had been far too unexpected. Faisal still had not awoken from the shock of that ambush. "Bastard! you're still quibbling. Ibak's face was red with anger, his rage unstoppable. A bunch of trash. Suddenly, a cold and emotionless voice rang out in the tent. The sudden voice caused Ibak, Faisal, and all the other Mamelukes in the tent to grimace. Although Ibak was reprimanding his subordinates, this was still an internal matter of the Mamelukes. Given Ibak's status in the Arabian Empire, not even Abu Muslim dared to speak in such a manner. This was tantamount to completely offending Ibak and the Mamelukes, an unwise course of action. But when they saw who had spoken, the anger in Ibak's and Faisal's eyes instantly faded. All of them had respectful expressions, not daring to say a single word. Qutayba. As the Arab war god and the strongest governor of war, only he would dare to speak of the Mamelukes in such a manner in front of Ibak and Faisal. Even so, Ibak and the others did not dare to retort. The reason was simple, none of them could defeat him. Qutayba, now is not the time to blame each other. The Tang dynasty's reinforcements are getting stronger with each wave, and not even the Revelation army was able to stop that last wave of cavalry. I sense that the Tang dynasty emperor might have dispatched his strongest army. This is not a good thing for us. Abu Muslim's voice came from the side as he finally stepped forward and tried to mediate. The Revelation army was the strongest elite army under Qutayba's command, and also one of the strongest armies in all of Arabia. Even Abu Muslim had to admit this. No ordinary army could contend with the Revelation army and even suppress them. At the very least, the Anxi Protectorate army of the Tang dynasty and Gao Xianji's elite Iron Wall army did not have this kind of strength. In Abu Muslim's judgment, only the emperor of the Tang dynasty could possess this kind of terrifying fighting power. The Battle of Talas had lasted for so long that both sides had invested countless soldiers. The Tang dynasty emperor should have made a move by now. Abu Muslim's words instantly silenced the tent. Even Qutayba's expression had calmed down. The urgent task at hand is to discuss how to defeat the Tang dynasty, destroy their army, and unify the entire Eastern world. Don't forget that His Majesty the Caliph is still waiting for our news. Abu Muslim sternly said. But they're using steel walls to hole up like turtles. Even if we have more soldiers, we'll find it very difficult to exert the power we should have, and they probably have even more elite soldiers than we do. Governor Osman of Cairo suddenly said, his expression extremely grave. His two elite armies, the Beheader army and the Tiber army, had suffered grievous losses in this battle, something that Osman had never expected. The chess pieces had already rolled off the chessboard and were developing in an unpredictable direction. His initial arrogance had vanished, and now even the ambitious Osman understood that they were facing an unprecedentedly powerful foe. The Tang people can't possibly hole up behind their walls forever, and this war is not something that the Tang people can stop with just a few steel walls, Abu Muslim said. Abu Muslim said. He raised his head and glanced at the people around him. Chapter 1108. Everyone had witnessed Qutayba's strength. A single bolt of sword chi was enough to send thousands of steel walls flying and was completely capable of opening a gap for the army. Thus, he still had a very good chance of defeating the Tang dynasty. Okay. Qutayba's entire body was covered in golden armor, making it impossible to see the expression on his face. Just when everyone believed that he would refuse, the Arab war god gave a rare nod. However, none of you are allowed to touch that black-robed elder of the Tang people. That person can only die at my hands. Everyone was dazed for a moment, but they quickly understood. Qutayba was hailed as the strongest governor of Arabia, with even Abu Muslim finding it very difficult to contend against him at times. But this time, he had actually encountered someone at Talas who could match him and block his attacks, the Elder of the East. This was something that the proud Qutayba would never be able to accept. Thus, rather than saying that Qutayba had agreed to Abu Muslim's request, it was more accurate to say that Qutayba wanted to kill that mysterious old man of the Tang dynasty. But at a time like this, no one was stupid enough to point this out, much less oppose him. There's one more thing. At this moment, Ziad suddenly spoke up, immediately drawing everyone's attention. Abu Muslim, Ibak, Osman, and the others all turned to look in shock. The Uzun and Western Turks can't continue like this. In this war, they only sent one army each and didn't send much else. In this campaign, our Arabian Empire has already lost more than 200,000 soldiers, while the Uzun and Western Turks have only lost 20,000. Since they want to ally with our Arabia and enjoy the fruits of our conquest, they can't continue to hide behind us like they are doing now. If you want to reap the rewards, you must pay the price. The Uzun and Western Turks must appear on the front lines. Ziad met everyone's gazes with a solemn expression. As the deputy governor of the East, Ziad had long been dissatisfied with Uzun and the Western Turks. In the first phase of the battle, if Uzun and the Western Turks had worked with the Arabs to attack from the rear, the Tang dynasty would have been attacked from the front and rear, and the current situation might have been completely different. Ziad and Abu Muslim might have already entered the city of Talas. Abu Muslim said nothing, a pensive look in his eyes. Inform them. We'll do as you say. Abu Muslim sternly said, finally coming to a decision. As long as he could win, Abu Muslim didn't care about anything else. The Tang people are so powerful. It seems that the emperor of the Tang dynasty has also noticed this place. He has even sent out the Luo iron cavalry. If he takes another step forward, I'm afraid he will personally lead the army. Far away from the Arabs, Daluan Ruozan, Huishu Wazang, Dusong Mengpoj, and Dawusali had also gathered. When speaking of the holy emperor of the Tang dynasty, a deep apprehension appeared in Huoba Senji's eyes. In the Tang dynasty, the emperor was not just the emperor. Even Huoba Senji knew that the number one expert of the Central Plains was not an imperial great general, nor was it an expert of some hidden sect. It was precisely the holy emperor hidden deep within the Tang dynasty's imperial palace. Just the name, Holy Emperor, was enough to show his status in the Central Plains and the entire Eastern world. After all, the most powerful era of the Tang dynasty had been created by none other than the Holy Emperor. If both of them had appeared at Talas, the outcome of this war would have been completely different. There's no need to worry about these things. A sovereign cannot lightly step onto the battlefield. In the southwest, if not for Jelifeng risking her life, we would not have been defeated so quickly. Meng Shizhao would not have been reduced to this state, completely submitting to the Tang dynasty in paying enormous reparations. The urgent task at hand is to think about how to deal with this war. Huishu Huizong suddenly said in the tent. Prime Minister, I feel like the Arabs are very likely to vent their anger on us after this crushing defeat. With these last words, Huishu Wazong turned to Daluan Ruozan, his eyes brimming with concern. Daluan Ruozan said nothing, his eyes revealing the same concern as Huishu Wazong. On this point, he and Huishu Wazong were in complete agreement. Ever since Qutayba and the two Arab great generals had arrived at Talas, the alliance between Uzun and Arabia had slowly become more complicated. Moreover, Daluan Ruozan could keenly sense that the authority to command this battle had shifted from Abu Muslim to the governor of war, Qutayba. This meant that the alliance between Uzun and Arabia was no longer as firm as it had been before, and many variables had been added to the mix. Now is not the time to think about these things. Only by winning this battle will our alliance with the Arabs have any meaning. Otherwise, in the future, Uzun will lose all ability to contend against the Tang people in the east. Daluan Ruozan sternly said. No matter how complicated the situation was, Daluan Ruozan would always be able to sort out the most important and crucial information from the tangled web of information. I don't know if any of you have realized, but in this war, Arabia's greatest advantage, its greatest strength, is actually not its elite soldiers, but that governor of war, Qutayba. All the soldiers of Arabia are subservient to him, and this is the source of Arabia's morale. But Qutayba seems to have met his match. With these final words, Daluan Ruozan turned to Dusong Mangpoj, a profound look in his eyes. No one knew the background of these two elders, but this was not the first time Daluan Ruozan had encountered them. The two sides had already interacted with each other when they were attacking the Tang dynasty reinforcements led by Su Hanshan. As for Dusong Mangpoj, this was probably his third meeting with these two people. Dusong Mangpoj said nothing, but his brow imperceptibly twitched as a hint of pain flashed through his eyes. He knew what Daluan Ruozan was talking about. In the Battle of the Triangular Gap in the northeast corner of the Uzan Plateau, it was precisely because of these two people that Dusong Mangpoj had suffered a crushing defeat, losing almost all of his soldiers. This had also left the Uzan without soldiers in the north, completely incapable of contending against the Tang dynasty. All they could do was watch as the Tang dynasty continued to invade the plateau. And according to the latest news, Dusong Mangpoj had even heard that the Tang dynasty had built a massive horse farm there to raise warhorses. As the proud eagle of the plateau, this was a disgrace that Dusong Mangpoj would never be able to erase for the rest of his life. Leave that person to me to deal with. At that moment in the future, no one will be able to stop Kateba. After a long while, Dusong Mangpoj regained his composure and finally spoke. Tap tap tap. At this moment, a series of hurried and heavy footsteps came from outside the tent, breaking the silence in the tent. A voice in Arabic quickly resounded in his ears. Prime Minister of Uzan, is Daluan Ruozan here? This voice had the unique trill of an Arab voice. Come in. Daluan Ruozan grimaced as he immediately said. An Arab guard with thick hair, hawk-like eyes, and a deep nose quickly walked in. Prime Minister, Lord Governor has ordered that in tomorrow's battle, Uzan should mobilize its soldiers and cooperate with us. The Arab guard got straight to the point. Buzz. Daluan Ruozan's expression darkened, and he grimaced. What did this Arab say? Duo Sili, who had been silent all this time, suddenly spoke up. Daluan Ruozan did not hesitate and immediately relayed the Arab guard's intentions. In a flash, the mood in the tent changed, and even Wuxia Huizong showed a hint of anger on his face. He had known that the Arabs would vent their anger on them, but he hadn't expected it to be so fast. Moreover, it seemed like the Arabs wanted Uzan to be the vanguard and serve as cannon fodder. These bastards are going too far. Before Daluan Ruozan could say anything, Dian Ersongrong couldn't help but interject. Whether it was Daluan Ruozan, Dusong Mangpoj, Wuxia Huizong, or Dewusili, they were all supreme existences to the young elites of clans like Dian Ersongrong, truly important personages. But it was precisely because of this that they found the Arab demand even harder to accept. Ha ha ha, Prime Minister, do you need me to kill him? The Brigadier General of the Yarlung royal lineage, Dama Trimo, patted the golden Buddhist saber on his waist and heartily laughed. His eyes were as sharp as swords as they constantly scanned the Arab guard like he was a piece of meat on the chopping block. Bastard! What do you think you're doing? The hairy, hawk-eyed, and deep-nosed Arab guard angrily said. Although he didn't understand Uzan, Dama Trimo's eyes clearly expressed his intentions. Dama Trimo, stop! Wuxia Huizong harshly said. Even he had heard of Dama Trimo's murderous nature, but now was not the time for internal strife. Since the great general has spoken, I'll reluctantly let this reckless scoundrel go. Dama Trimo wickedly chuckled. Wuxia Huizong and the Yarlung royal lineage's great general Namri Songtian had an extraordinary friendship, and Wuxia Huizong's loyalty to Uzan was well known throughout the plateau. Although Dama Trimo had an extremely murderous nature, he also deeply admired and respected this loyal great general. Daluan Ruozan quickly waved his hand, ordering the Arab guard to withdraw. The tent instantly fell silent, all eyes focused on Daluan Ruozan. Chapter 1109. Prime Minister, what do we do now? Do we really have to take the vanguard for the Arabs tomorrow? Wuxia Huizong stepped forward. I feel that the most urgent task at hand is to figure out who gave the order, Abu Muslim, Qutayba, or Osman. Our initial target of alliance was Abu Muslim. If this order came from another Arab governor, I believe that we don't need to treat it so seriously. Dusong Mangpoj suddenly spoke, his expression serious and his eyes thoughtful. Now is not the time to think about which governor gave the order. No matter whose order it was, it has already been approved by Abu Muslim. The Arabs have suffered too many losses, so it's not surprising that they hope that we can take their place and reduce their casualties. For the sake of our cooperation and for the sake of defeating our common enemy, the Tang dynasty, we will probably have to take the field this time. Daluan Ruozan gave a long sigh. The current state of the war was far from what Daluan Ruozan had expected. Compared to the dissatisfaction of the Arabs, Daluan Ruozan was more worried about the Tang dynasty. Ha ha ha, Daluan Ruozan, I didn't think that you would make things difficult for such a minor matter. The Arabs are arrogant and conceited and look down on us. Then let's go tomorrow and show them our strength. The powerful empires of this world are not limited to the Arabs and the Tang dynasty. Loud laughter rang out as Wuxia took 2 steps forward, his eyes shining with a fierce light. Unlike the others, Wuxia did not seem to care at all about the Arab order. In fact, he even seemed a little expectant. Soldiers are raised for 1,000 days to be used in a single day. Since Prime Minister is making things difficult, let us Western Turks take the vanguard tomorrow. Wuxia confidently declared. The tent was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Everyone stared at Wuxia in shock. Daluan Ruozan looked pensively at Wuxia, and then he suddenly understood. The night passed quickly. On the second day, the wind howled, and the air was cold. From a distance, one could see that the ground outside Talas was covered in a thin layer of frost, and even the 2 steel defense lines were the same. Soldiers stood behind the steel defensive line, their bodies shivering. They also felt a wave of coldness. Compared to yesterday, the weather was much colder. With each passing day, the region to the west of the Tsong Mountains seemed to grow colder. Although it was not yet the season for snow, all of Talas seemed to be covered in snow. Even the ordinary soldiers could sense the abnormality of the weather, but even so, the mood in Talas was somber. Compared to the war that was about to begin, not many people cared about the changes in the weather. Woo! A loud horn suddenly sounded, breaking the tranquility of the morning. As everyone watched, the silent Arab camp seemed to awaken like a slumbering beast, and groups of Arab soldiers began to surge toward Talas. Neigh! The neighing of horses, the clamoring of men, the clattering of armor, all of this combined into one. As everyone watched, for massive black Arabian war banners rustled in the cold morning wind as they swiftly made their way to the first defense line. Under the black war flag, for majestic figures, tall and sturdy, with incomparable majesty, quickly leaped into everyone's eyes. At the very front of the army was a golden figure that was like the sun that had descended to the mortal world, attracting everyone's attention. It's Qutayba. Hurry and report this to Milord. The sight of this figure in front of the first defense line caused the Tang dynasty soldiers to shiver, their sleepiness instantly vanishing and their faces turning nervous. Hiya! A scout quickly mounted his warhorse and galloped into Talas. The Arabs have moved out. Now it's our turn. Nearby in the rear of the army, Wuxia squinted, his eyes shining with excitement. Hiya! Wuxia urged his black steed into the air and began to gallop toward the battlefield. Behind him, a dense sea of Western Turkic cavalry formed up in formation, shouting and yelling as they excitedly followed Wuxia. Awoo! Following closely behind them were tens of thousands of enormous green wolves that were even larger than humans. They formed a pack and bared their fangs as they pounced forward with lightning speed. Let's go! In the rear, Daluan Ruozan, Wuxia Wazang, and the others looked away from Wuxia and gave the order to lead the nearly 70,000 Uzan cavalry forward. The air was somber, and as the army moved out, Talas was swept up in fierce gales, sending sand and pebbles flying. Boom! Not long after the Arabs set out, there was a deafening clatter of metal as the two thick gates of the towering talahs opened. A group of soldiers with bright eyes and brimming with energy strode out of the gates in an orderly fashion. Translated by Hypersheep 325. The armors on their bodies were covered in scars made by swords and sabers. Not only did they not look shabby, but they also gave people the feeling that they were well-tempered and had an indomitable will. The 7 ladle-like star marks on their chests clearly indicated their identities. The Divine Martial Army. The Divine Martial Army had suffered significant casualties in yesterday's battle, but after a night of rest, the Divine Martial Army had returned to its peak state in terms of spirit, energy, mind, and stellar energy. The rumbling continued as the Divine Prison Army, the Dragon Stallion Army, the Roaring Tiger Army, all the mighty soldiers marched out of the city gates. At the very back of the army were Wang Chong, Wang Yan, Gao Xianji, Qing Qianli, and the other highest commanders of the Tang dynasty. Wang Chong, something's wrong. The Arab formation today seems to be different from yesterday's. Gao Xianji drove out of the city gates and immediately frowned when he saw what was going on. Almost instinctively, Gao Xianji sensed a subtle change in the enemy formation. It seems like the chess piece we laid down earlier has taken effect. The Western Turks are about to enter the field. Wang Chong glanced over and couldn't help but smile. The Arabs suffered too many losses in yesterday's battle. Qutayba and Abu Muslim probably want to use Wuxia as cannon fodder. Cannon fodder? Gao Xianji frowned at this word. It means scapegoat. Wang Chong faintly smiled. Boom! In the distance, the horns blared, and Qutayba and the others stopped. The two armies faced off against each other, the air thick and somber. The commanders of the army, Qutayba, Abu Muslim, Wang Chong, and Gao Xianji, were also staring at each other, their gazes exploding with light. The vast majority of these gazes were on Wang Chong atop the white-hoofed shadow. Even the Arab war god Qutayba had noticed Wang Chong, the young commander of the Tang dynasty. Wang Chong, it seems like you've already become a thorn in their side. You'll have to be careful in the battle. Gao Xianji suddenly broke into laughter. Then let them come. I'm just worried that they won't be able to break my karmic battle armor. Wang Chong faintly smiled. The surrounding officers couldn't help but laugh at these words. Wang Chong's martial arts weren't necessarily the best, but few people could compare to his defensive prowess. Even Qutayba would find it very difficult to kill him, much less anyone else. Moreover, the evil emperor and chief of Wuxiang were present. Even if Qutayba and Abu Muslim wanted to, they wouldn't have the chance. When the battle starts, let's kill that brat first. Ibak viciously said as he stared into the distance. He won't be able to escape. Whether it's him or that Gao Xianji, both of them will die here. Boom! Osman took 2 steps forward, his expression cold and sinister. Although the Tang people had won yesterday's battle, their advantage had not been that great. The Arabs still had the advantage in numbers, and the Arabs still had not sent out all their elite generals. Abu Muslim, we've lost enough men. Let the Uzan and the Western Turks go first. Let them block the edge of the Tang people. After all, they are the armies of the Eastern world. With these final words, Osman turned to Abu Muslim. Abu Muslim was the main person in charge of this alliance and the true executor. It was naturally best for him to deal with the Uzan and the Western Turks. Abu Muslim nodded and called over a messenger. Pass on my order. Inform the Western Turks and the Uzan to prepare to move out. Your subordinate will go. The Arab messenger bowed and quickly left. Shamshak, Chekan Benba, it's time for us to enter the field. Pass on my order. All soldiers are to charge. On the other side, Wuxia gave a carefree laugh when he received the Arab message. Not only was there no fear in his eyes, there was even a hint of anticipation. It had been more than a month since he had obtained the formation phenomena, and during this time, Du Wussili had been practicing it day and night. He had gained some understanding of the formation, and he had also fused his own martial experience and understanding into it. He was confident that the formation phenomena would be even more powerful than before. Du Wussili was now confident that he could face any opponent. Chapter 11:10. A Wu. Howls resounded through the air. The first to move was not Du Wussili's 20,000 elite soldiers, but the vast sea of azure wolves that had followed Du Wussili from the western Turkic steppe. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a piece of flint, smoke and dust surged. It was unknown how many wolves were howling as they formed groups and rushed towards the first line of defense. Following closely behind the wolves were countless Western Turkic soldiers, all of them waving their sabers and swords and roaring in excitement as they surged toward the first defense line. Crack. Not long after these 20,000 soldiers surged forward, a thunderbolt exploded. As everyone watched, thunderclouds began to gather over the Western Turkic cavalry. In the blink of an eye, they cast a massive shadow over the Turkic cavalry. Rumble. In the sky above the Western Turkic army, dark clouds were roiling, countless bolts of lightning shuttling through them. It was an extremely frightening sight. The moment these thunderclouds appeared, all the Western Turkic cavalry seemed to have been injected with adrenaline, their strength, speed, and dexterity exploding. Abu Muslim, Osman, Ziad, and the others couldn't help but be moved by this sight. The strength the Western Turks had displayed at this moment was enough for even the Arabs to view them in a new light. This bastard was actually hiding his strength. A hint of anger flashed through Huoba Senji's eyes. Last time, when Su Hanshan had led the Tang dynasty reinforcements, he had clearly been needed, but this scoundrel had been hiding his strength, only using his formation phenomena now. Du Wussili was saving his formation phenomena for a moment like this. Why else do you think Du Wussili was so proactive last night? Doluan Ruozan calmly said as he looked forward. He just wants a bigger piece of the pie. Du Wussili's ability to play the fool had reached a certain level. If one didn't know his goal and only looked at his actions and words, it would be very easy to be fooled and toyed with. But even so, in front of Doluan Ruozan, Du Wussili had no secrets to speak of. Doluan Ruozan could see through all of Du Wussili's secrets and intentions. Let's go. We should also get ready to move out. Doluan Ruozan urged his horse forward. Whoosh! The strong wind blew sand and stones into the air, stirring up a dense cloud of dust. Like raindrops, the dust smashed against the steel wall, emitting a series of resounding sounds. A hint of a smile appeared in Wang Chang's eyes as he gazed at the wolf pack surging toward him. This is truly a case of Li Gui fighting Li Kuei. To think that Du Wussili would want to use my formation phenomena to deal with me. How interesting. A hint of amusement appeared on Wang Chang's lips as he looked at the approaching Western Turkic army. The seed he had sown more than a month ago had finally blossomed, sprouted leaves, and bore fruit. It was now time to reap the harvest. In the distance, Du Wussili's wolf pack and army were getting closer and closer to the first defense line. Du Wussili had chosen an extremely clever angle of attack, precisely on the left flank where the Tang dynasty had suffered a heavy blow yesterday and the Revelation army had pierced through it. Many of the steel walls there had been sent flying by the Revelation army, and the entire defense line was crooked and crooked. Even now, it had not been completely repaired. How clever! Wang Chong couldn't help but exclaim in praise at this sight. Du Wussili's craftiness had seeped into his bones, and he would never let go of any opportunity that he discovered. But if Du Wussili thought that this would give him an advantage, he was gravely mistaken. Prepare the beehives. Xue Qianjun, prepare to enter the field. Yes. This general will go. Xue Qianjun faintly smiled, apparently having expected this. After bowing, he swiftly left the army. A few moments later, a mixed group of Ferganians, Karluks, and Tang dynasty soldiers was moved to the left flank. This bastard, what's the meaning of this? Does he think that he can defeat my army like this? Wuxia was infuriated by this sight. Formation phenomena was the supreme art of cavalry and also the greatest strength of any army. Once one cultivated formation phenomena, the strength of an army would be greatly boosted. For Wang Chong to use this motley crew to deal with his army left Wuxia feeling deeply humiliated. He did not believe that this was some sort of mistake or coincidence. Everyone in the world knew of Wang Chong's military strategy, and there was no doubt that Wang Chong wanted to humiliate him. Humph, pass on my order. Inform Shamshak and Chechen Benba to kill these Tang dynasty soldiers and cut through their left flank. Leave none alive. Wuxia savagely ordered. In the distance, the battle was on the verge of breaking out. In the cold and gloomy winds, nearly 100,000 azure wolves were lunging at the left flank of the Tang dynasty. All the azure wolves that he had brought with him had been sent to the battlefield. These were the vanguard of the Western Turks and also the strength that the Turks were using to probe the Tang dynasty. Wuxia did not have the silver behemoths that the Arabs had, so he could not stop the ballistae of the Tang dynasty. But none of this was important. This vast sea of azure wolves was the best defensive barrier. Ready. Release. The giant green wolves were getting closer and closer. He could even see the gravel and dust kicked up by their limbs. He could clearly see their white fangs and saliva dripping from their sharp fangs. Without the slightest hesitation, amidst a series of creaking sounds, all of the steel city walls opened up the honeycomb holes in front of them. Sharp arrowheads were densely packed, arranged in a formation, and pushed out from within. 30 zhang, 20 zhang, 100 zhang, boom. 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 On the left flank of the Tang dynasty, the steel walls seemed to come to life, instantly unleashing a torrent of arrows. These steel arrows seemed capable of toppling mountains and overturning seas, instantly engulfing all the azure wolves in a radius of several hundred meters. A wu. A cyan giant wolf couldn't dodge in time, and was instantly pierced through the waist by a short steel arrow, nailing it to the ground. Then, 2, 3, 4. Tens of thousands of cyan giant wolves were covered by the rain of arrows, and were nailed to the ground in dense clusters. Ready. Release. With a creaking sound, the second volley of arrows arrived like a swarm of locusts. A wu. A wu. The howls of the wolves became more and more shrill. Due to the speed of the green wolves, after being pierced by the rain of arrows, their bodies rolled on the ground, kicking up a cloud of dust. They only stopped after being smashed more than 10 meters away. Blood gushed out and flowed freely on the ground. Everyone, hear my order. While the Tang people are reloading their arrows, charge for me. Shamask pulled out his saber and harshly said, his eyes fixed on the enemy. The beehive attacks of the Tang dynasty seemed fierce on the surface, each volley like a rain of death, but they were actually not as frightening as imagined. Although the volley of arrows was terrifying, it required time to reload. The gap between volleys of arrows was the best opportunity for the Western Turks to attack. Damn Tang people! Prepare to be slaughtered. Shamshak leaned against his horse, his eyes bursting with killing intent. A scholar who had been away for 3 days had to be looked at in a new light. If the Western Turks could break into the steel defense line on the left flank, the Tang would suffer the same fate as when the Revelation army descended yesterday, slaughtering them like pigs. In the past battles, the Western Turks had always been the ones being suppressed. But now was the time for the Western Turks to hold their heads high and wipe away their shame. Rumble. As the beehives on the left flank of the Tang dynasty reloaded, nearly 20,000 Western Turkic cavalry roared and madly charged. Kill! Roars shook the heavens as countless Western Turkic warriors madly charged at the left flank of the Tang dynasty. Boom boom boom. The reloading was completed very quickly. Amidst the rumbling sounds, the dense rain of arrows whistled out once more. 1 wave, 2 waves, 3 waves, the number of wolves in front of the defense line dwindled, and by the time they were still several meters from the first defense line, the wolves had lost more than 60,000 of their numbers. In the face of such terrifying killing power, some of the surrounding wolves instinctively felt fear and began to flee to the sides. The wolf pack in front of Shamshak's forces instantly thinned to the extreme. Shields! Just as they were about to enter the range of the beehives, Shamshak bellowed as he grabbed a large shield from his horse and placed it in front of him. There was a clattering of metal as the halos beneath Shamshak, Checkenbenba, and all the Western Turkic cavalry began to vibrate at an extremely high frequency. This was the sign of the final charge. Bang! Just when Shamshak and the Western Turkic cavalry had finished their preparations, a torrent of arrows poured down, but when they struck the shields of Shamshak's forces, they were all blocked. Neigh! At that moment, a loud neigh of a horse resounded across the entire battlefield like thunder. But this neigh did not come from the horses of Shamshak's forces. In a flash, Shamask seemed to sense something and raised his head in alarm. He saw a sturdy black warhorse charging out from behind the left defense line. It immediately began to gallop toward Shamshak's forces. As if it was some sort of signal, in an instant, countless warhorses rushed out from the gap in the first line of defense like a tide. What? Shamshak and Checkenbenba were both stunned by this sight. This mob of mercenaries and Tang dynasty soldiers had actually dared to leave the defense line and attack. None of them had even dared to imagine such a thing. Kill them. Chapter 11:11. Everyone, hear my order. The first group will be at the Kan position, the second group will be at the Kuan position, the third group will be at the Qian position, and the fourth group will be at the Li position. Everything will be done according to the drill. Understood? Xue Qianjun excitedly stared at the Western Turkic army on the left flank. The roiling thunderclouds in the sky were nothing more than a joke in Xue Qianjun's eyes. You dare to compete with Marquis in scheming? Dewusili, you're not just one level off. As this thought flashed through Xue Qianjun's mind, he immediately became one with his steed and charged forward. Beside him, Banahan and the King Gonka were even faster, brushing past Xue Qianjun to meet Shamshak and Checkenbenba. Kan, Kuan, Qian, Li, these were the positional arrays of the Central Plains, and the mercenaries of the western regions knew almost nothing about them. Thus, Wang Chong had assigned several soldiers of the Tang dynasty to each mercenary group and had these soldiers of the Tang dynasty lead the mercenaries in choosing the positions to attack. Boom! Dust churned and roars shook the heavens as more than 10,000 Ferganians, Karluks, and Tang dynasty soldiers charged at the Western Turks with astonishing speed. Awoo! In the face of the Tang cavalry that had suddenly appeared, a giant green wolf could not dodge in time and was rammed by a warhorse. The hard hoof of the horse viciously stomped on the giant wolf's forehead, crushing its skull. With a low growl, it immediately tumbled to the ground and lay motionless. Almost at the same time, amidst the rumbling sound of horse hooves, a cold light swept across the void and slashed at a charging giant wolf. Even though the wolf had sensed the danger ahead and had retracted its neck in response, it was still too late. With a flash of the saber light, the giant green wolf was immediately split into two halves by the charging long saber. 1, 2, 3. Tens of thousands of giant wolves howled in pain. Under the attack of more than 10,000 mixed cavalry of the Tang dynasty, they were utterly defeated. In the face of this majestic and invincible army, the pack of wolves finally could not resist the fear in their hearts, and they scattered like birds and beasts. This time, the mixed cavalry of the Tang dynasty and the Western Turkic army were no longer hindered. More importantly, both sides were moving at maximum speed, and the distance between them was less than 20 zhang. Boom! Just as the two armies were about to collide, an earth-shattering boom rang out. Under the astonished gazes of Shamshak and Checkenbenba, thunder boomed. Above the motley crew of the Tang dynasty, a mass of clouds rolled and gathered. Unexpectedly, a formation phenomena appeared. Impossible. Bastard. Shamask and Chechen Benba seemed to be infuriated by this sight, their entire bodies seething with rage. But before they could react, more than 10,000 soldiers of the Tang dynasty, divided into 7 or 8 groups, smashed into the Western Turkic formation phenomena. One small, one large, one weak. For the first time on the foreign battlefield of Talas, two kinds of formation phenomena clashed like never before. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Dewusili, Duluan Ruozan, Huishu Wazang, Dusong Mangpoj, and even the distant Kataba, Abu Muslim, and Ibak looked over. Formation phenomena was an ancient and powerful power that was extremely attractive even to the Arabs. Now it all depends on the final result. In front of the first defense line, Wang Chong and Gao Xianji were also looking to the left flank, a strange light in their eyes. Boom! A massive axe seemed to cleave through the sky. As the two armies clashed, the formation phenomena above the 20,000 Western Turkic cavalry suddenly split in two, and then into countless pieces that vanished without a trace. No! In the distance, Dewusili's eyes went wide at this sight, and he felt like he was going to stop breathing. He had spent a great deal of effort, kidnapping Chen Bin, negotiating with Wang Chong, and scheming with Duluan Ruozan, to finally cultivate this formation phenomena. He had never imagined that it would be completely broken in a single moment. In a flash, all the hopes and ambitions in Dewusili's mind had vanished like bubbles. But this was only the beginning. The moment the formation was broken. Aya! Screams filled the air as the energy of the Western Turkic cavalry fell into disarray. Under the charge of the mixed army of the Tang dynasty, the strength they had gained from the formation phenomena instantly plummeted. Not only that, with the collapse of the formation, all the Western Turkic cavalry suffered a backlash. Not only did they find it impossible to maintain their level of cultivation, their cultivation levels plummeted, and the stellar energy in their meridians went into disarray. It was simply impossible for them to block the charge of the Tang dynasty cavalry. Bang! 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 The two armies clashed, and screams filled the air as countless Western Turkic cavalry fell from their horses, their necks slashed by sharp sabers and swords, their blood splattering everywhere. 4,000, 6,000, 8,000, in just a few seconds, the Western Turks had suffered an astonishing number of casualties. Retreat! Retreat! Shamshak's face contorted as he listened to the sounds of falling corpses. The Western Turkic Khaganate had less than 20,000 soldiers left on the battlefield. Losing more than 8,000 in a single clash was a heavy blow to the Western Turks. Ni. The entire left flank was thrown into chaos, and horses neighed. In the distance, Dewusili's complexion had turned extremely unsightly. If one looked carefully, one could see that his fists were clenched so tightly that they were even trembling. But as the Western Turks were collapsing, the stampede of hooves came from behind them, kill. Behind Shamshak and Chechen Benba, a vast army of Uzun soldiers had charged out. In a flash, it had charged through the air and smashed into the great Tang camp. Kill them! Dayan Ersongrong, Dari Nisai, Chili Sulong, and the others roared as they charged into the Tang dynasty defense line. These young elites of the great clans were still on their way, but they had already taken out their sabers and unleashed surging saber energy that slashed at the Tang dynasty defense line. Boom boom boom. There was a heaven-shaking explosion as countless Tang dynasty soldiers were blown into the air by this saber energy. Behind them, dust churned and the earth quaked. The vast Arab army was also charging in. As far as the eye could see, the battlefield was packed with people, and the sight of the Arab cavalry charging at full speed was a powerful visual assault. It was like they were about to leap over the steel defense line and trample over them. At this sight, Wang Chong's expression instantly turned grave. To the Arabs, the Western Turks and the Uzun were just the appetizers. Moreover, the Arabs had never thought about relying on them. Ready! Wang Chong waved his hand and gave the order. Creak creak. Creak creak. A series of mechanical creaks began to ring through the air. More than 6,000 Tang dynasty ballistae were lined up in front of the first defense line, aimed at the Arabs beyond the defense line. In other parts of the defense line, all the soldiers had taken up their positions and were ready for battle. Release. With a wave of Su Hanshan's hand, countless ballista bolts exploded forward like dragons emerging from the sea. Even though this was not the first time the Tang dynasty ballistae had displayed their might on the battlefield, the bone-chilling buzzing and shuddering still struck fear into everyone's hearts. Bang bang bang. In the blink of an eye, countless cavalry had been pierced through by ballista bolts along with their horses. But the soldiers in the rear did not slow down. On the contrary, they used all sorts of methods to stimulate their warhorses and push their speed to the limit. If there was no way to defend against these Tang dynasty ballistae, then the best method was to shorten the charge as much as possible and reduce the number of casualties. Rumble. Countless Arab warhorses galloped over corpses as they charged forward with astonishing speed. Cui Piaoqi, get ready. Wang Chong said without turning his head as the winds howled and the mood on the battlefield grew tenser and tenser. This general will go. A cold and deep voice came from behind him, suffused with a soaring fighting spirit. Cui Piaoqi rode a large warhorse, his head held high and his chest puffed out as he unsheathed the sword at his waist. Behind him were more than 7,000 Wuxian cavalry, all of them lined up in neat formations, their muscles taut like drawn bows, ready to charge at any moment. In yesterday's battle, the Wuxian cavalry had fought 1 against 3, simultaneously dealing with the Mamelukes, Mutri Great Cavalry, and Celestial Wolf Cavalry. In this battle, they had lost more than 3,000 men. This was the first time in the Wuxian cavalry's history that they had suffered such heavy losses. But even so, the 3 Tang dynasty cavalry, the Wuxian cavalry's opponents, had also suffered heavy losses, and their casualties were much higher than the Wuxian cavalry's. Move out. With Wang Chong's order, the 7,000 Wuxian cavalry shot forward like arrows, men and horses charging forward as one. Rumble. The earth seemed to crack open, and before the Arab soldiers could react, the 7,000 Wuxian cavalry had already charged out from behind the first defense line and into the Arab army of several 100,000. Ah! In the blink of an eye, the 7,000 Wuxian cavalry sent the Arab cavalry flying like they were made of paper. The 7,000 Wuxian cavalry showed no sign of fear in the face of an army several dozen times their number. 5,000, 7,000, 8,000, 10,000, these 1 in 100 Arab elites were unable to take a single blow from the 7,000 Wuxian cavalry. In a few short moments, the Arabs had lost nearly 10,000 soldiers. But the Wuxian cavalry had suffered almost no casualties. The charge of the Wuxian cavalry had thrown all of Arabia into chaos. Aibak, it's time for your men to enter the field. Chapter 11-12. Humph. I understand even without you telling me. Aibak's eyes exploded with cold light as he looked into the distance. Faisal, if the same situation occurs again, bring your head to me. Milord, be at ease. That situation will not occur again. A respectful voice came from behind him. Faisal deeply lowered his head, and with a wave of his hand, he led his 6,000 Mamelukes in a charge at the distant Wuxian cavalry. A fall into a pit, a gain in one's wit. He had been caught off guard by the Wuxian cavalry the first time, but no matter what, he could not lose to them again. If the same situation occurred again, he would choose to commit suicide even without Aibak's order. Huoba Senji, all of you move out as well. Duluan Ruozen's eyes and ears were sharp, and he had noticed the Arabs the moment they began to move. Although this battle is between Arabia and the Tang dynasty, it is also related to the fate of Arozan. We can only win, not lose. This general understands. Huoba Senji immediately turned and left. A few moments later, he had mounted a warhorse and led his 3,000 some Mutri Great Cavalry forward. Of the more than 7,000 Mutri Great Cavalry, only 3,000 some remained. This was a massive loss that Huoba Senji had never imagined when he had first set out from the royal capital. And the main culprit was the Wuxian cavalry. Huoba Senji had long ago been suppressing his rage, and it was only getting more and more intense. Even without Daluan Ruozen's order, he would still have thought of a way to enter the field. The war between Uzun and the Tang dynasty, the Mutri Great Cavalry and the Wuxian cavalry, was far from over. On the other side, the 2,000 some Celestial Wolf cavalry also charged at the Wuxian cavalry upon seeing the Mamelukes and Mutri Great Cavalry move. Kill these heathens! Battle cries shook the heavens. As the Wuxian cavalry, the Mutri Great Cavalry, the Mamelukes, and the Celestial Wolf cavalry clashed, the Tang dynasty's defense line had undergone a heaven-toppling transformation. Boom boom boom. More and more Arab cavalry galloped through the air, crashing into the steel defense line of the Tang dynasty like meteors. The pressure on the Tang dynasty suddenly increased exponentially. Mo Saber team, move out. As Wang Chong saw more and more Arab cavalry, he calmly waved his hand and gave the order. Following Wang Chong's order, the 5,000 soldiers of the Mo Saber squad raised their sabers high and stood like a wall as they rapidly advanced. In this battle, both the Tang dynasty and the Arabs had invested many of their elite soldiers. At the same time, both sides had suffered massive losses. In yesterday's battle, the Mo Saber unit had lost only 5,000 soldiers from 10,000. But even so, the Mo Saber unit still possessed a fighting power that could not be underestimated. Their terrifying charge was still a nightmare for the Arabs. Wind. Forest. Fire. Mountain. With a heaven-shaking roar, the 5,000 soldiers of the Mo Saber unit left the defense line and began to advance at full speed toward the sea of Arab cavalry. Boom boom boom. In the frigid winds, the Mo sabers gleamed with cold light as they were swung up and down. Wherever their blades passed, men and horses would be cut down in gruesome deaths. 5,000, 8,000, 10,000, the 5,000 soldiers of the Mo Saber unit had only just stepped onto the battlefield when they displayed their peerless lethality. In just 2 attacks, nearly 10,000 Arab corpses had been slain, and this number was only continuing to rise. This frightening efficiency left large swathes of the battlefield empty. The 5,000 Mo Saber soldiers were the coldest, most efficient, and most emotionless killing machines on the battlefield. From a certain perspective, the killing efficiency of the Mo Saber unit was even more frightening than that of the ballista army. The simplest reason was that the Mo Saber unit didn't need to use up any ballista bolts, and every time they swung their Mo Sabers, an enemy would be killed. Ziad, make arrangements for the Ironblood army and Fearless army to enter the field. It's our turn now. Abu Muslim suddenly said as he gazed into the distance. Yes, my lord. Ziad grunted in acknowledgement and quickly left. The battle was escalating even faster than yesterday. The Tang dynasty's Mo Saber unit had entered the field, and it was about time for the top-class Arab army to enter the field. It wouldn't be long before Abu Muslim, Osman, and the other top-class great generals would enter the field and end this battle. General Wang, get ready. It's time for you to enter the field. Wang Chong had been keeping an eye on Abu Muslim's group beneath the 4 black banners this entire time. The moment Ziad left, Wang Chong had already guessed at what they were up to. Generally, this battle can only be won, not lost. Once it begins, we can't stop until the Arabs have been defeated. As for the war banners, we'll be relying on you. After giving orders to Wang Sili, Wang Chong quickly turned to the black armored guard wielding the 9 dragon blood war banner. The black armored guard was covered in many secrets, and Wang Chong realized that he had almost no time to rest. Whether it was eating or resting, he never took off his armor. He rarely spoke, except when it came to the war and the 9 dragon blood war banner, he almost never interjected. After interacting with him for so long, Wang Chong only knew that he had been sent by the Holy Emperor and was one of the Holy Emperor's personal guards. He didn't even know what he looked like. All he knew was that he had the surname Li. If the banner exists, the man exists. If the banner dies, the man dies. The black armored guard took a step forward and said only 8 words. Wang Chong and Gao Xianji trembled at these words, a hint of respect appearing in their eyes. Banner Protector. This was perhaps the best way to describe the black armored guard at this moment. His identity, age, and name were all unimportant. His only value in existence was to protect the 9 Dragon Blood War banner. Rumble. The warhorses were getting closer and closer, the several thousand Iron Blood soldiers rapidly approaching the battlefield. When they were still 500 some zhang from the first defense line, there was a massive boom. Wang Sili led the charge, leading the 2,000 soldiers of the Divine Martial Army out from behind the steel walls. Swish 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 swish. The Big Dipper greatswords stabbed forward like agile snakes, and in the blink of an eye, the dense ranks of Arab cavalry were felled like raindrops, their blood spraying through the air in a bloody mist. Let's go. It's the top-class army of the Tang dynasty. The appearance of the Divine Martial Army caused the Arab cavalry at the very front to fall into chaos, especially those who had experienced the killing power of the Divine Martial Army. The moment the Divine Martial Army stepped out of the steel walls, it was immediately thrown into disarray. Bang! Not long after the Divine Martial Army stepped out of the defense line, a massive banner forged from deep-sea Xian iron and some other unknown metal was thrust into the ground. At this moment, all the origin energy on the battlefield of Talas began to change as a vast, ancient, and valiant energy began to radiate across the battlefield. In a place that no one was paying attention to, an invisible force spread out like a ripple. It quickly radiated to the feet of the 2,000 soldiers of the Shenwu army. Bzzz. 1 halo, 2, 3, 6 halos appeared beneath the feet of the Divine Martial Army. The power of the Shenwu army was already at the top of the world. With the support of these 6 halos, their auras rose again and again. In just a short period of time, they reached an astonishing level. Clang! A sword clanged through the air. In an instant, a Big Dipper sword sliced through the air. It was also an ordinary strike, but it immediately left behind a series of afterimages in the air. The speed of the sword was inconceivably fast. Whoosh! With a single slash, it cleaved an Arab horseman in 2. The sword continued onward, cleaving a second and a third horseman in 2, the immense force of the blow flinging their corpses more than 10 meters away. Kill! The 2,000 soldiers of the Divine Martial Army glanced at each other in tacit understanding and immediately picked up their pace, charging at the Arab cavalry. Rumble! The army was thrown into disarray. Each soldier of the Divine Martial Army possessed inconceivable strength, and with the support of the 6 halos, they were unstoppable. Ah! Waves of panic-stricken cries resounded throughout the battlefield, incessantly lingering in the ears. Thousands of Arab cavalry were sent flying like pieces of paper by the charge of the Divine Martial Army. Not even the charging warhorses could stop the momentum of the Divine Martial Army. Deafening roars filled the air as more and more Arab cavalry charged at the Divine Martial Army, unaware of the truth. But in the face of these powerful Divine Martial Army soldiers, they were like ants trying to shake a tree, sent flying. The 2,000 Big Dipper greatswords buzzed incessantly as they slashed through the air again and again. Every time they slashed through, countless people would be sliced into 2. Severed limbs flew through the air. In just a few moments, the area around the 2,000 soldiers of the Divine Martial Army was littered with corpses. Impossible! Seeing this tragic scene, the Iron Blood Army, which was charging over, turned pale with fright. They had clashed with the Divine Martial Army in yesterday's fierce battle, but the strength of the Divine Martial Army at that time had been within the normal range, far from this terrifying level. Based on the abilities they had displayed, apart from the top core of the Iron Blood Legion, ordinary elites were no match for them at all. Hurry up! Kill them! The 2,000 soldiers of the Iron Blood army sped up and charged at the divine martial army. Ha, old foes! On the battlefield, greedy wolf Great General Wang Sili had just cut an Arab horseman in two and sent him flying 10 some zhang when he saw the activity in the distance. With a sneer, he turned his head. Chapter 11-13. Translated by Hypersheep 325. Wang Sili strode forward to meet the Iron Blood army. 100 feet, 80 feet, 50 feet. Rumble. The two supreme armies of the world fiercely clashed. A soldier from the Iron Blood army clashed with a soldier from the Shenwu army. The soldier was blown into the air by the terrifying power of the sword and flew into the distance. At almost the same time, several soldiers of the Iron Blood army raised their swords in an attempt to block the attacks of the divine martial army. In the past, when the two armies were of equal strength, these swords would have been enough to block the attacks of the divine martial army, but the Big Dipper great swords of the divine martial army pierced through their chests, sending an indescribable pain through their chests. This is impossible. How could their swords be so fast? The same thought flashed through the minds of the Iron Blood army soldiers. Their vision instantly turned black, and they all fell to the ground like straight wooden pillars, motionless. Pang, pang, pang. The scene of a stalemate that everyone had imagined did not appear. Swathes of the Iron Blood army soldiers fell one after another. In just a single exchange, the number of Iron Blood army soldiers had dropped from 2,000 to 1,500, and it was still dropping. How could this be? Just what did they do? In the distance, beneath the four black banners, Osman and Ibak, the two supreme Arab commanders, were dumbstruck. Abu Muslim had maintained a calm and collected expression this entire time, but at this moment, a look of extreme shock appeared in his eyes. Even the Arab war god Qutayba imperceptibly creased his brow. Inform the fearless army to speed up and work with the Iron Blood army to kill them. Abu Muslim's brow was tightly creased as he immediately ordered. If an individual or the strength of the Iron Blood army alone could not defeat them, then they would use their advantage in numbers and send more people to crush the opponent. Pass on my order. Have the Dragon Stallion army enter the field. Wang Chong drew back his gaze and said without hesitation. Yes. A voice came from behind him. Before his voice faded away, a messenger stirred up a cloud of dust and quickly ran to the back. A few moments later, clang. There was a flash of cold light as 1,800 Dragon Stallion army soldiers lined up, their swords level with their chests, their bodies exploding with powerful auras. Yesterday's battle had been even more bitter than they had imagined. Of the 4,000 soldiers of the Dragon Stallion army, only 1,800 remained. But even so, this army still maintained an extremely powerful combat power. Boom! The moment Wang Chong gave his order, all the Dragon Stallion army soldiers focused on the front and began to stride forward. The earth quaked and the sky swayed. The Dragon Stallion army of just 1,800 soldiers erupted with an aura that was even greater than that of tens of thousands of soldiers. Whoosh! On the other side, the black armored guard holding the 9 Dragon Blood War banner glanced at the several thousand Dragon Stallion army soldiers nearby and waved the black and red banner in his hand. At the same time, there was a clattering of metal as a sharp halo wrapped around the feet of the Dragon Stallion army soldiers. Bolstered by this halo, the strength of the Dragon Stallion army began to rapidly rise. Not only that, but in the blink of an eye, a second halo appeared, then a third, a total of 6 halos appeared around Long Stallion's body. Bang! 6 different war halos added to the halo of the Dragon Stallion army. 7 halos resonated with each other, rumbling as they resonated with each other. In the next moment, there was a deafening explosion. Thousands of Dragon Xiang army soldiers wielded their long swords and marched in an orderly manner. Like dragons emerging from the sea, they quickly stepped out from behind the tall steel walls. Kail. Kill. Without the slightest hesitation, several thousand dragon stallion swords howled through the air and slashed at the incoming Arab cavalry. Blood sprayed and screamed as explosions rang out. Countless Arab cavalry were flung into the air by the dragon stallion army swords, their severed limbs flying through the air. Target, the fearless army. At the very front of the army, the commander of the dragon stallion army, Brigadier General Long Jian, a subordinate of Biting Protector General An Sis Hun, gripped his sword and harshly called out. The fearless army was the strongest army under Abu Muslim's command, even stronger than the Iron Blood army. In the past, the dragon stallion army might not have been a match for the fearless army. In yesterday's battle, a significant portion of the dragon stallion army had been killed by the fearless army. But that was then, and this was now. The dragon stallion army's strength, speed, agility, and explosive power had all soared. They could not even be mentioned in the same breath as before. For the governor. Kill them. Amidst the galloping warhorses, the warriors of the Fearless Legion quickly noticed the unstoppable dragon Xiong Legion charging out from behind the city walls. They had originally been charging at the Divine Martial Army, but they immediately changed their minds and began to charge at the Dragon Stallion Army. Clang, the edge of the saber vibrated and emitted a bloodthirsty hum. Several dozen feet away, the soldiers of the Fearless Legion crouched down and immediately crossed their sharp sabers in front of their chests. Their eyes were sharp as they strode toward the Dragon Xiong Legion. The scimitars swept through the void, emitting a heart-palpitating buzzing sound. Even the air itself was slashed with scimitars. The fearless army had already reached the pinnacle of mastery over scimitars. In front of their scimitars, even steel could be cut through like tofu. In yesterday's battle, a significant number of the top-class soldiers of the Tang dynasty had been injured by the fearless army. 5 steps, 3 steps, 2 steps, boom. One of the scimitars slashed through the air at the ribs of a dragon stallion soldier, while the other, as fast as lightning, fiercely slashed at the head of that dragon stallion soldier. By the time the fearless army soldiers saw the 2 Arabian scimitars gleaming with callous light, they had already appeared in front of the Divine Martial Army soldier, only a few inches away. In just a second, that elite Dragon Stallion Army soldier would be beheaded and cut into 3 pieces. However, just as this fearless army soldier was about to succeed, boom. There was a flash of light, and a heavy sword swiftly struck the saber in his left hand that was swinging towards his head. Meanwhile, the scabbard at his waist instantly blocked the scabbard. These 2 moves were so clean and swift that even the fearless army soldier was stunned. He had fought with the Dragon Stallion army in yesterday's battle, but they had not been this fast. But now, the Dragon Stallion army seemed to be even faster than the fearless army. Humph, surprised. The Dragon Stallion army soldier sneered. Although they didn't speak the same language, the contempt in his heart was clearly expressed in his eyes. Bang! A moment later, an enormous energy erupted from the Dragon Stallion army soldier's sword like a volcanic eruption. With a massive boom, the fearless army soldier was sent flying by this unstoppable energy, his entire body trembling. Even though he did his utmost to stop and stabilize himself, he was still sent flying 7 or 8 steps back. The Fearless Legion soldier's expression instantly changed. The time for revenge has come. Kill them. A low roar came from the side, and the Dragon Stallion army soldiers became energized as they charged at the fearless army soldiers. A scholar who had been away for 3 days had to be looked at in a new light. Although they had practiced this technique countless times in the second training ground of Talas, the Dragon Stallion army soldiers still felt an unprecedented excitement when they saw it in actual combat. Boom boom boom. The heavy swords continued to swing down, clashing with the Arab scimitars time and time again, causing countless sparks to fly through the air. The clash of scimitars and swords produced deafening booms that resounded over the battlefield. For a moment, the fearless army did not suppress the Dragon Stallion army as Abu Muslim and the others had expected. On the contrary, the Dragon Stallion army, with its smaller numbers, had completely taken control of the rhythm of the battle and the fearless army. The mountainous swords and the storm-like attacks of the fearless army continued to push back the fearless army. Swish swish swish. A fearless army soldier was too slow to react, and the scimitar in his hand was knocked aside by the dragon stallion army soldier. The sharp tip of the sword arced through the air like a shark that had smelled blood, piercing through the fearless army soldier's body. Impossible. The fearless army soldier gurgled as his body froze in place, and then he dropped to the ground. Even in death, he didn't dare to believe that he would die like this to the dragon stallion army. The chaos was rapidly spreading, and more fearless army soldiers were falling. Hurry and help the fearless army. Kill these Tang people. A group of Arab horsemen roared, swinging their scimitars as they charged forward, intending to help the fearless army reverse the tide of defeat. But a moment later, there was a flash of cold light in the air. The dragon stallion army soldier who had been attacking a fearless army soldier suddenly turned around and stomped on the ground, causing the ground to crack open. This dragon stallion army soldier was like a tiger or dragon as he charged at the Arab horseman. Boom! The heavy sword parted the air and cleaved through the body of an Arab horseman, cleaving the man and his horse into 4 halves and dropping to the ground. The dragon stallion army soldier did not pause for a moment. Squelch! He stepped forward and thrust his sword through the neck of an Arab warhorse, the sharp tip of his sword piercing through the head of the Arab horseman on the back of the horse, killing him in a single blow. Squelch! In a single step, he had killed a second Arab horseman, and then a third, a fourth, a fifth. In just 6 steps, Ney had slaughtered a group of 6 Arab horsemen, their corpses strewn across the ground. In an instant, the surroundings fell silent. As the dragon stallion army soldier slowly sheathed his sword and wiped the blood off his wrist, the surrounding Arab horsemen all revealed looks of shock and fear. Even the warriors of the fearless army were deeply moved. This was not a battle, but a massacre. Chapter 11:15. Kill. The sounds of fighting shook the heavens as the ignorant Arab cavalry in the rear roared and galloped forward. In a flash, everyone came to their senses and the battle once more became brutal. This is impossible. Absolutely impossible. In the distance, Ziad muttered to himself beneath the fluttering black war banner, completely dumbstruck by this sight. The fearless army's reputation had been forged through one cruel and fierce battle after another, forged through its terrifying strength. Those powerful foes prostrating on the ground and transforming into ghosts were enough to prove just how powerful the fearless army was. But now, the fearless army was completely suppressed in front of everyone. Moreover, they outnumbered the fearless army. This was something that no one had expected. Ziad almost subconsciously turned his head to look at Abu Muslim. Abu Muslim was silent, his body still standing tall and straight, but Ziad could sense that he was just as shocked as he was. Osman, dispatch the Beheader Legion and Tibbs Legion under your command. Abu Muslim suddenly turned to Governor Osman. Osman nodded without the slightest hesitation. He had worked with Abu Muslim for many years, and he had long ago understood his old friend's intentions. The Arabs had never advocated individual bravery. Everything was done with the goal of defeating the enemy. These top-class armies of the Tang dynasty were unimaginably powerful. In this situation, they could only rely on their advantage in numbers to defeat their foes. Pass on my order. The Beheader army and Tibbs army, move out. Osman turned his head around and spoke to the adjutant beside him without hesitation. Yes. The adjutant bowed and quickly left. In just a short while, a cloud of dust filled the air as the two armies rapidly surged forward. Once the Tibbs army and Beheader army had left, Abu Muslim looked away. After a few moments of silence, he turned to the governor of war, Qutayba. Tap. As Osman, Ibak, and Ziad solemnly watched, Abu Muslim suddenly strode toward Qutayba. Lord Qutayba, could I trouble you to dispatch the Blood Beast army and Death army? As everyone looked on in shock, Abu Muslim respectfully bowed to Qutayba. Everyone knew that Qutayba and Abu Muslim did not have a very harmonious relationship. Not too long ago, the two had even clashed. No one had expected Abu Muslim to bow to Qutayba. This was no different from admitting defeat in a different way. But even more shocking was Qutayba's attitude. Sure. Qutayba looked at the battlefield across from him, his voice unexpectedly calm. He did not use this chance to jeer at Abu Muslim. Behind him, beneath the black banner, Osman, Ibak, Ziyad, and all the others were stunned. Boom! No matter how shocked everyone was, a moment later, the Blood Beast Legion and the Death Legion set off towards the other side of the battlefield in a cloud of dust. Roaring Tiger Army, Divine Prison Army, Ultimate Martial Army, Xuanwu Army, everyone, get ready. The Beheader Army, Tibbs Army, Blood Beast Army, and Death Army had only just begun to move when Wang Chong immediately gave the order. Your subordinate will go. A string of voices came from behind him, and then the earth began to quake as the armies began to move forward upon hearing Wang Chong's order. The battle had begun even faster than expected. A few moments later, the earth quaked as the 3rd Elite Arab Army arrived on the battlefield. The Tibbs Army was one of Governor Osman's strongest forces. Last time, their opponent had been the Mo Saber Army, but this time, their opponent had changed. Bang! The moment the Tibbs Army appeared, an army crossed over and quickly walked out from behind the first steel city wall. Clang clang clang. Countless sabers and swords clashed in the air, exploding with sparks. The 3rd army that Wang Chong had dispatched was the Divine Prison Army, which had the strongest offensive power. In a flash, sword chi swept through the battlefield, and the Tibbs Army was defeated far faster than anyone had imagined. Although the Divine Prison Army had fierce attacks, its greatest weakness had always been its lack of defense. Thus, in yesterday's battle, the Divine Prison Army had suffered far more severe losses than expected. But now, with the 6 halos of the Divine Prison Army, this flaw had been perfectly remedied. Boom! The halos vibrated as the black halos under the feet of the Tibbs Army warriors began to spin and tremble, their surfaces exuding a metallic luster. The rapidly spinning halos struck the ground, and with a massive boom, the hard stone floor of the Tala's battlefield began to crack like tofu. The Tibbs Army soldier, bolstered by the power of the halos, lunged at the Divine Prison Army like a cheetah. The Tibbs Army might not have the strongest offensive or defensive power of the Arab Army, but its explosive power and speed for a short period of time were among the best in the Arab Army. Even the fearless army might not be able to compare to them in this aspect. Of the 5,000 soldiers of the Tang dynasty's Mo Saber unit, more than half had been killed by the terrifying explosive power of the Tibbs Army. The explosive power of the Tibbs Army was so strong that it could even shatter the tough armor of the Mo Saber unit. But this time, just as the Tibbs Army soldier was about to tear apart the Divine Incarcerate soldier in front of him, a sharp sword chi suddenly rippled through the air. A moment later, the Tibbs Army soldier's head flew into the air. Even in the moment of his death, he had no idea what had happened, and his face remained the same as it had been a moment before he had exploded. The speed at which the Divine Prison Army drew their swords had reached an unimaginable level under the support of the 6 additional war halos. Even when these Tibbs soldiers erupted with power, they couldn't compare to it. Plush! 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 The Divine Prison Army moved with incredible speed, their narrow swords becoming the world's most terrifying weapons in their hands. In the blink of an eye, at least 600 or 700 Tibbs Legion soldiers had been decapitated by the Divine Incarcerate Army soldiers, and the number of casualties was still rapidly increasing. Bang! As the Divine Incarcerate Legion attacked with all their might, one of the Tibbs Army soldiers shrunk his body, his muscles tensing like a hunting beast. Taking advantage of the moment when a Divine Incarcerate Legion soldier was distracted, he viciously slashed his blade at the soldier's back. With the ferocious explosive power of the Tibbs Army, even steel would be blasted apart by this slash. But in a flash of light, Just as the saber struck, one of the divine prison soldier's 6 halos suddenly erupted with light, protecting the soldier's body. As the saber and halo clashed, a low roar came from the air. If one looked carefully, one would see that the image of a black tortoise with the head of a dragon and the body of a turtle had appeared on the divine prison army soldier's back. The distant Daluan Ruozan, Dewusili, Huishu Wazang, Abu Muslim, and Ibak all trembled at this sight. This was clearly the black tortoise halo of the Xuanwu army, but for some reason, it had appeared on the body of a divine prison army soldier. Boom! The black tortoise illusion was shattered along with the black tortoise halo. The tremendous power that erupted from the Tibbs army shattered the divine prison soldier's armor in one fell swoop. At the same time, the ferocious force sent him flying. However, the divine incarcerate army soldier coughed up a mouthful of blood. After flying 20 to 30 feet away, he quickly came to a stop and abruptly turned around, glaring fiercely at the Tibbs army soldier who had ambushed him. Die! With a swing of the sword, an extremely sharp sword chi burst out and quickly attacked the Tibbs legion soldier. After a few seconds, there was a miserable scream, and the Tibbs legion soldier was immediately decapitated. His body was riddled with holes that looked like honeycombs. The Arabs had never expected this battle to develop in such a way. No one knew what had happened, but the explosive growth in strength of the divine martial army, the Xiang dragon army, and the divine incarcerate army was clear to all. In the rear, Abu Muslim, Osman, and the others all grimaced. For Arabia. Deafening roars reverberated throughout the battlefield. The top-class Arab soldiers were still arriving. Behind the Tibbs army, the 4th army, the Beheader army, was quickly arriving to provide reinforcements. Xuanwu army, move out. Wang Chong ordered without turning his head at the sight of the Beheader army. The Xuanwu army and the Beheader army could be considered mortal enemies. In yesterday's battle, the Beheader army had suffered grievous losses, but the Xuanwu army had suffered even more. The Xuanwu army was currently far fewer in number than the Beheader army, but Wang Chong had not hesitated to send out the Xuanwu army. Boom boom boom. Behind the divine incarcerate army, the Xuanwu army, which had the strongest defenses, marched forward in an orderly fashion and quickly entered the battlefield. 1 halo, 2, 3, with the support of 6 additional halos, the Xuanwu army's strength swelled, and the remaining 2,000 soldiers of the Xuanwu army charged like a storm toward the Beheader army. Kill! For the Tang dynasty! Kill all these infidels! The two armies roared like tigers and wolves at the same time, crazily attacking each other. Saber lights and sword shadows intertwined, reverberating in the sky above the battlefield. Boom boom boom. Halos clashed against halos, their explosions kicking up clouds of dust. Chapter 11:16. In just a single clash, the war halos of the hundreds of Beheader army soldiers had exploded in dazzling fashion. Not even a top-class Arab army like the Beheader army was able to contend against the enormous number of halos around the Xuanwu army. And when the halos shattered, the consequences became apparent, swish swish swish. Swords were plunged into the bodies of the Beheader army soldiers, and when they were pulled out, the corpses of the Beheader army soldiers littered the ground. Even the distant Abu Muslim, Osman, and the others couldn't help but widen their eyes at this terrifying casualty rate. Now it's up to Qutaybah's army. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, the 4 of them simultaneously turned to look at the Blood Beast army and Death army. Of the 3 governors, Qutaybah's army was undoubtedly the largest and strongest. The moment Qutaybah's Revelation army appeared, it had reduced the Xuanwu army from 8,000 to 2,000. If they wanted to defeat this army of the Tang dynasty and break their defenses, they could only rely on Qutaybah. Get ready. The strongest opponent has arrived. In the distance, Wang Chong's eyes flashed as he spoke from behind the towering steel walls. Of all the Arab armies, Qutaybah's 3 top-class armies had always been the focus of Wang Chong's attention. Leaping over the vast sea of Arab cavalry, Wang Chong immediately spotted the rapidly advancing Blood Beast Army and Death Army. Compared to the surrounding armies, these two armies stood out like cranes among chickens, their auras as vast as the sea and mountains, making them impossible to ignore. As these two armies approached, the mood on the battlefield grew more and more tense, countless gazes focused on them. Only Qutaybah's army could break out of this stalemate. If even these two armies could not do it, the Arabs would be utterly defeated on the battlefield. Not only that, if they could not seize the initiative on the battlefield, the Tang dynasty could use these top-class armies to hold back Qutaybah, Abu Muslim, and the other Arab great generals, using these top-class armies to exhaust their strength and create an opportunity for themselves. If he was surrounded by these top-class armies and consumed too much energy, even a powerful existence like Qutaybah, who had touched upon the subtle realm, might be defeated and killed. No great general had ever been able to single-handedly resist an army of more than 100,000 soldiers. Pass on my order. Mobilize the Revelation Army. Just as the two armies were about to clash, Qutaybah spoke from beneath the fluttering Arab war banner. Ibak, Osman, and the others were at first dumbfounded, but then they understood and complicated expressions appeared in their eyes. Were these infidel armies so powerful that not even Qutaybah could defeat them? Before the battle had even begun, he had dispatched his most powerful army, the Revelation Army. Yes, sir. A voice came from behind Qutaybah, and a brigadier general at Qutaybah's side immediately left to carry out the order. Putting aside the activity on Qutaybah's side, the vast Blood Beast Army and Death Army on the front line were like a torrent of destructive steel as they charged toward the most intense battlefield. Ready! A resonant voice echoed through the air. Clang clang. With a clattering of metal, the soldiers of the Roaring Tiger Army in Ultimate Martial Army swiftly drew their swords and held them against their chests, the sharp tips of their swords pointed at the sky. For a moment, the surrounding army fell silent, the atmosphere solemn and respectful. On the other side, the earth was trembling more and more intensely. Everyone could sense that two powerful storms of energy were rapidly approaching. Looking through the steel walls, one could see a drifting bloody mist and an even denser black mist approaching with astonishing speed above the Arab cavalry. Charge! With this earth-shattering order, the 2,600 Roaring Tiger Army soldiers broke the silence. Like dragons and tigers, they raised their swords and charged out from behind the steel walls. Whoosh! The moment they charged out, the black-armored guard in the rear waved the 9-dragon blood war banner, causing the earth to quake and invisible energy to spread through the earth and bless the Roaring Tiger Army. Clang, clang, clang. The Roaring Tiger Corps' halo instantly increased from 1 to 7. With the support of the 6 additional halos, the Roaring Tiger Corps, which was already stronger than the Fearless Legion, soared to an unbelievable level. Ah! With a scream, an Arab horseman and his horse were thrown more than 100 feet into the air by a Roaring Tiger Army soldier. A second, a third, countless Arab horsemen were thrown into the air by the attacks of the Roaring Tiger Army. These Arab horsemen and their horses weighed several thousand jin, but to the 2,600 Roaring Tiger Army soldiers, they seemed weightless. Not only that, the moment the Roaring Tiger Army soldiers attacked, their tyrannical and fierce stellar energy had already passed through their swords and into the bodies of the Arab horsemen. The moment these Arab horsemen were thrown into the air, they were already dead. Boom boom boom. Wherever the 2,600 Roaring Tiger Army soldiers went, countless Arab horsemen fell to their swords. This time, the Roaring Tiger Army had adopted a completely different strategy. Instead of waiting, they had taken the initiative to attack the Blood Beast Army and Death Army. Although they only had 2,600 soldiers, their momentum was unstoppable and unstoppable. This army of 2,000 some was even more powerful than an army of 20 to 30,000. Hear my order. No one is allowed to retreat until we kill these Arabs. The Roaring Tiger Army commander, Du Wuwei, gripped his sword with both hands, his body exploding with a heaven-shaking killing intent. As one of Zhang Shogui's most experienced generals, it had been a very long time since Du Wuwei had encountered such a powerful foe. Whether it was the Gogurians, Khitans, Western Turks, or even the Uzan, all of them could only bow their heads and admit defeat before the Roaring Tiger army. But these Arabs made the Roaring Tiger army feel for the first time what a formidable foe was. At the same time, this aroused the pride and killing intent of the Roaring Tiger army, one of Zhang Shogui's top-class armies. Kill! The 2,000-some soldiers exploded with heaven-shaking roars, their killing intent so intense that even space itself began to distort. Amidst these cries, the Roaring Tiger army soldiers charged at the Arabs. Kill them! Don't leave a single one alive! At the same time, the vast army of the Blood Beast army sensed the rapidly approaching Roaring Tiger army, and several thousand soldiers began to charge at the Roaring Tiger army. 200 feet, 100 feet, 50 feet, rumble. Under the watchful eyes of countless people, the two armies fiercely collided with each other like raging waves crashing against the shore. No one could describe the collision in that instant. It was like a bolt of lightning flashed across the battlefield, suppressing all the shouts, the sounds of collisions, and the neighing of the warhorses. The heavy sword and scimitar clashed, and the clatter of the clash left everyone alarmed. It was like a collision of mountains, not sabers and swords. The two most powerful armies of the Great Tang and Arabia seemed to be locked in a stalemate for both a moment and countless centuries. A moment later, there was a heaven-shaking roar as countless soldiers were flung into the air. Thud thud thud. As the countless Blood Beast army soldiers fell from the sky like rain, the entire battlefield was thrown into an uproar. The Tang Dynasty! The Tang Dynasty! The Tang Dynasty! Endless cheers resounded through the heavens as the name of the Roaring Tiger army resounded through the battlefield. The morale of all the soldiers of the Tang Dynasty was greatly boosted by this battle. As for the Arabs, they were all stunned. Follow me. No matter what, we have to suppress them. The eyes of one of the Death Army commanders in the dense ranks of the Arab cavalry flashed at this sight, and he immediately ordered his army to accelerate toward the Roaring Tiger army. Everyone, hear my order. Move out with me. Behind the walls, the thousand-some soldiers of the ultimate martial army had been staring at the Death Army. As the Death Army began to pick up speed, all the soldiers of the ultimate martial army raised their swords and surged out from behind the steel walls. Rumble. As the vast sea of Death Army crashed into the Roaring Tiger army, the thousand-some soldiers of the ultimate martial army also charged forward with astonishing speed. Clang! 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 In the time it takes for a spark to fly off a flint, it was impossible to distinguish the silhouettes of people. Only the intense collision of swords and sabers could be heard. For a moment it was unknown how many people were sent flying and how many fell to the ground, lying motionless in pools of blood. When the Roaring Tiger army and the ultimate martial army worked together, the killing power they possessed was unimaginable. They were clearly outnumbered, but the Roaring Tiger army and the ultimate martial army had the upper hand. Bang! A Death Army soldier charged forward with astonishing speed, but before he could even get close, a sword pierced through his knee. Just as he knelt on the ground, another long sword instantly pierced through his chest, ruthlessly nailing his corpse to the ground. A foot quickly stomped down on the chest of this Death Army soldier. In the next moment, he pulled out his two swords, stepped over the corpse, and continued forward. In terms of speed, strength, dexterity, and defense, the Death Army had been utterly routed. Whether it was the ultimate martial army or the Roaring Tiger army, their individual strength far surpassed the Death Army. As countless people watched, the 7 resplendent halos around the 2 legions were like giant axes as they carved out a path through the Blood Beast Legion and the Death Legion on the chaotic battlefield. The Roaring Tiger army and the ultimate martial army were gaining victory after victory while the Blood Beast army and Death Army were being pushed back. Chapter 11-17. Gallop. Just as the Blood Beast Legion and the Death Legion were locked in a bitter battle, a plume of dust soared into the sky in the distance. Countless golden lights flickered beneath the dust, and countless golden-armored warriors mounted on warhorses charged forward like a storm. Marquis, it's the Revelation Army. With just a glance, Su Kei's complexion flickered, and he turned his head. Although the Holy Emperor had sent the 9-dragon blood war banner and rapidly increased the strength of the army, everyone was still fearful of the dreadful fighting power of the Revelation Army. General Li, I'll have to trouble you. Wang Chong suddenly turned to the black-armored guard behind him. The guard said nothing, only gave a slight nod. Rumble. Everyone watched as the black-armored guard took a step forward, the 9-dragon blood war banner in hand. In that instant, the earth quaked and the mountains shook, and the winds and clouds in the sky changed color. Under everyone's gaze, the black-armored guard strode forward, leaving the steel defense line for the first time and heading towards the intense battlefield ahead. As he stepped forward, the Divine Martial Army, Divine Prison Army, Dragon Stallion Army, Roaring Tiger Army, Ultimate Martial Army, Xuanwu Army, and the 9-dragon blood war banner in the black-armored guard's hands began to respond. The 7 halos and the 9-dragon blood war banner seemed to form a complete entity. As he stepped out of the first defense line, the black-armored guard suddenly stopped and turned to Anshi Protector General Gao Xianji. All of you move out as well. Gao Xianji understood and gestured to the Iron Wall army behind him. In the next moment, more than 1,700 soldiers of the Iron Wall army lined up neatly and marched out from behind the first line of defense without any hesitation. Whoosh! The black-armored guard waved the 9-dragon blood war banner, and an invisible energy shot out, instantly piercing through all the soldiers of the Iron Wall army. Clang clang clang. The energy of the 1,700-some soldiers of the Iron Wall army swelled. 6 new war halos of different colors shot out from the bodies of the Iron Wall army soldiers like quicksilver spilling onto the ground, rapidly wrapping around their feet. In the blink of an eye, all the Iron Wall army soldiers had joined the 9-dragon blood war banner, becoming one with the Divine Martial Army, Divine Prison Army, Dragon Stallion Army, Roaring Tiger Army, Ultimate Martial Army. Looking down from the sky, the top 7 armies of the Tang dynasty echoed with each other, vaguely surrounding the 9-dragon blood war flag, forming a huge and strict formation. Buzz! When the 7 armies gathered and stepped out of the first line of defense, the wind and clouds changed in an instant. Above the 7 top-notch armies, light and shadow intertwined. An ancient golden tablet, more than 10 meters tall, suddenly appeared in the void. Upon closer inspection, 5 ancient and mysterious black inscriptions were carved on the golden tablet. These 5 inscriptions seemed to contain some ancient law energy, and they were completely different from any other language in existence. They were so ancient that they seemed to be even older than the history of the human race. At the base of the golden stele, there was a flash of light, and then a massive dragon more than 100 feet long howled out. It coiled around the golden stele and looked disdainfully at the vast sea of Arab cavalry outside the army. Roar! There was no sound in the air, but everyone in a radius of several thousand feet could hear the roar of a massive dragon resounding through the heavens. This voice was as mighty as hell, and everyone instinctively felt a deep fear from the bottom of their hearts. Without any warning, the Arab warhorses in Ney suddenly neighed in fright and reared up. Bastard! What's going on here? Sensing the strange movements of their horses, the Arab horsemen were alarmed and began to curse in Arabic. The 9-dragon blood war banner was a formation that used the war banner as its center. Once activated, it would release a faint draconic pressure that would intimidate all warhorses and beasts in a radius of several thousand feet. Nay! In the blink of an eye, countless warhorses galloped madly and collided with each other, creating a scene of chaos. Everyone, hear my order. First destroy the opponents of the Blood Beast Army and Death Army, and then crush all the infidels. Amidst the rumbling of hooves, the Revelation Army's commander-in-chief swiftly issued an order. This Revelation Army commander was a head taller than even Li Sai, and what was even more astonishing was his sharp gaze. In a flash, he had already formulated a strategy to deal with the Tang dynasty. There was no question that the Roaring Tiger Army and the Ultimate Martial Army were the strongest of all the armies, and the Revelation Army's strategy was simple and crude. As long as they could kill the enemy, the strongest army would immediately deal a massive blow to the morale of the enemy and cause them to crumble without even fighting. This was the theory of the Revelation Army's assault. Clang clang clang. The soldiers of the Revelation Army unsheathed their swords, the dense forest of golden swords reaching into the sky. Whoosh! The golden swords hung down in unison, pointing forward like spears at the Roaring Tiger Army and Ultimate Martial Army that were fighting with the Blood Beast Army and Death Army. The thundering of hooves filled the air. The moment the Revelation Army moved out, the soldiers on the battlefield began to flee in every direction. The charge of the Revelation Army was like a tide that could topple mountains and overturn seas, drowning out the sounds of battle between the Ultimate Martial Army and Death Army. The only sound left on the battlefield was the thundering hooves of the Revelation Army. Ready. Although the Roaring Tiger Army and Divine Martial Army hadn't yet seen the Revelation Army, they instinctively sensed an intense danger the moment the Revelation Army approached. Their hearts shivered and they immediately became vigilant. At almost the same time, all the Xuanwu army soldiers under the Nine Dragon Blood War banner stared in shock at that golden light, their eyes turning red. It's the Revelation Army. A Xuanwu army soldier harshly called out. Although they hadn't been able to tell at the start, by the end of the battle, almost all the Xuanwu army soldiers knew the name of this Arab army. The 8,000 soldiers of the Xuanwu army had not been at a disadvantage against the Beheader army, but the moment the Revelation Army entered the battlefield, it immediately suffered grievous casualties. The army of 8,000 was instantly reduced to 2,000. At that moment, the entire battlefield was littered with the corpses of their comrades from the Xuanwu army. The Xuanwu army that had been able to hold off the Beheader army and even suppress them had been torn apart like paper by the swords of the Revelation Army. For the first time on the battlefield, all of them felt a deep sense of helplessness and sorrow. Everyone, pay attention. The Revelation Army. The soldiers of the other armies quickly noticed the abnormality of the Xuanwu army, and they also noticed the Revelation Army approaching like a bolt of golden lightning. The Xuanwu army was not one bit inferior to the other armies. If the Revelation Army could pierce through them, they would undoubtedly pose a massive threat to the other armies. Clang clang clang. The special golden armor of the Revelation Army constantly rubbed against each other, giving off a shrill that only grew louder and louder. This sound was completely different from that of any other armor. Ready. A heaven-shaking roar resounded over the battlefield. The Revelation Army was an existence that stood at the top of the pyramid of soldiers in Arabia, perhaps even the entire world. When all the soldiers of the Revelation Army charged with all their might, they were like an avalanche. Anyone who wasn't at this level would feel a huge impact and pressure. The Revelation Army that could utterly crush the Xuanwu army was not an army that ordinary armies could deal with. But a few moments later, the several thousand soldiers of the Revelation Army charged out of the sea of Arab cavalry like a golden ray of light, charging at the Roaring Tiger Army and Ultimate Martial Army. Clang! The two strongest armies of the Tang dynasty only had time to raise their swords and collide with the Revelation Army. Time seemed to slow down countless times. Everyone watched as the symbol of the Revelation Army's golden greatsword slammed into the human wall of the Roaring Tiger Army and Ultimate Martial Army, clashing with the greatswords in their hands. Rumble. The moment the two swords, which weighed no more than a few dozen pounds, collided, heaven and earth shook. It didn't seem like a battle between two people or a dispute between two swords. Instead, it was like two mountain peaks, two enormous prehistoric beasts, slamming into each other. Qutayba, Abu Muslim, Wang Chong, Gao Shenji, and even the distant Daluan Ruozan and Dewusili were all watching this intense battle. This clash would undoubtedly decide the course of the war. If the Revelation Army could tear apart the Roaring Tiger Army and Ultimate Martial Army, they would be able to utterly crush the Tang Dynasty's army and plunge their high morale to the nadir. Not only that, they would be able to pierce through the Tang Dynasty's formation and lead the Blood Beast Army, the Death Army, and the other armies to crush the Tang Dynasty army like a sharp blade. Everything would be completely different. Bang! With a heaven-shaking boom, time flowed back and everything returned to normal. As countless people watched, several figures were flung into the air. Even more people were pushed back by the charge of the Revelation Army, their halos flickering like candlelight. Not even the 7 halos of the Roaring Tiger Army and Ultimate Martial Army could stop the charge of the Revelation Army. As one of the strongest armies in the world, the Revelation Army had reached an unimaginable level. Even the Roaring Tiger Army and Ultimate Martial Army, strengthened by the 9-Dragon Blood War banner, found it difficult to contend against them. Hold! Chapter 11:18. Thump thump thump. After retreating 7 or 8 steps, the Roaring Tiger Army and Ultimate Martial Army soldiers stomped on the ground, a massive force bursting into the ground and instantly cracking it. At the same time, they stabilized their bodies. Assemble! Another roar rang out. The moment the Revelation Army, Blood Beast Army, and Death Army attacked, all the Roaring Tiger Army and Ultimate Martial Army soldiers swiftly regrouped. Before the Revelation Army could reach them, they had already assumed defensive formations, their ranks tight. Buzz! The Revelation Army soldiers on horseback instantly paled at this sight. The Revelation Army's charging ability was unparalleled in the world. Once they were unable to stop their charge, only death awaited them. This was the first time the Revelation Army had seen the Roaring Tiger Army and the Ultimate Martial Army regroup so quickly after being scattered, not giving their opponents a single opportunity to strike. Not only that, although the Roaring Tiger Army and Ultimate Martial Army seemed to have been suppressed in this charge, only 7 or 8 people had died. This result was simply unimaginable. It was truly all bark and no bite. Kill them. A moment later, the Revelation Army reacted. No matter how strong these 2 Tang Dynasty armies were, as long as they could not contend against the Revelation Army, only death awaited them. It was only a matter of time before they were slaughtered by the Revelation Army. Rumble. The earth once more began to quake. The Blood Beast Army, Death Army, and Revelation Army, the 3 supreme armies under Katabua's command, gathered together and surged toward the Roaring Tiger Army and Ultimate Martial Army. Buzz! No one noticed that in the rear of the Roaring Tiger Army and Ultimate Martial Army, the Black Armored Guard waved the 9-Dragon Blood War banner. In a flash, the entire battlefield began to churn and change. Under the gazes of countless people, thunderclouds gathered, and streams of crimson light with a hint of gold in it swept out from the giant golden monument in the sky, instantly entering the bodies of the armies. A moment later, the entire formation began to move. Kill! Before the Revelation Army could charge over, a moment later, a wave of light shook and a heaven-shaking battle cry came from the side. Kill them! Avenge our brothers! The 2,000 Xuanwu army soldiers gripped their swords, their eyes red as they charged into the midst of the Revelation Army, Death Army, and Blood Beast Army with thunderous speed. At such a close distance, not even the Heaven Enlightenment Army could defend in time. In the blink of an eye, the 2 armies collided fiercely. But this was only the beginning. The 2,000 soldiers of the Black Tortoise Army had no intention of lingering. After a fierce clash, the Black Tortoise Army, Roaring Tiger Army, and Ultimate Martial Army were driven away by the array. Boom! Another army arrived and struck the Revelation Army. However, in the next instant, this army also retreated. The Divine Martial Army, Divine Prison Army, Dragon Stallion Army, Iron Wall Army, these armies, supported by the 9-Dragon Blood War banner, charged at the Revelation Army one after another. Halos shook and the earth quaked. In the face of these dazzling attacks, even the Revelation army was thrown into disarray. They had no idea who their opponents were or which army they should pursue. At every moment, an army was retreating, and at every moment, an army was attacking from the rear. Once, twice, thrice, 4 times, in the face of these waves of attacks, even the Revelation army found it somewhat difficult to endure. In a few short moments, the Revelation army had been attacked 23 times. Boom! This powerful army was finally forced to retreat, its formation falling into chaos. At this moment, all the Revelation army soldiers paled. Now, Wang Chong had been staring intently at the battlefield this entire time, and when he saw this sight, he immediately gave the most fatal order to the Revelation army. "Chulu, go!" Wang Chong suddenly turned his head and shouted at Chulu, who was standing 20-some feet away. Although Chulu was very dissatisfied with Wang Chong and the Tongluo army had a grudge with Wang Chong, on this battlefield, Wang Chong was the highest commander. At this crucial moment, even Chulu had to listen to Wang Chong's orders. 20-some feet away, Chulu viciously glared at Wang Chong and then looked away. Clang! He unsheathed his sword. "Everyone, follow me." Before he could finish speaking, the cavalry charged forward, Chulu leading the several thousand Tongluo cavalry behind him like lightning bolts. "Careful, the Tongluo." The eyes of a Death Army officer constricted at the sight of the Tongluo charging forward. They had learned of the name of this army from Daluan Ruozan. As the personal guards of Taizong's era, the Tongluo were indisputable. Rumble. One Arab army after another tried to change directions to stop the Tongluo, but it was too late. In the blink of an eye, several thousand Tongluo cavalry in bronze armor pierced through the ranks of the Revelation army like a sharp knife, stabbing into the ranks of the Revelation army. Buzz! The moment the Tongluo cavalry struck the Revelation army, Wang Chong waved his arm and gestured to the left, toward the 3,000-some Azure martial army personally trained by Tang dynasty war god So Yongsun. The next moment, the earth rumbled, and the Azure martial army charged out from behind the steel city walls like thunder. Their momentum was overwhelming, and it was extremely shocking. The Azure martial army had been the strongest force under the command of Tang dynasty war god So Yongsun. Although time had been short and this army had not been able to truly reach the level of unstoppable might that had struck fear into the hearts of all the surrounding powers and empires. But it had already reached 60 to 70% of its former strength. Whoosh! When the last Azure martial army entered the battlefield, the black armored guard, who stood in the middle of the battlefield like a god, suddenly waved his war flag. 2 enormous forces instantly gushed out and simultaneously enveloped the Tongluo iron cavalry in the distance and the Azure martial army, which was the last to enter the battlefield. Whether it was the Tongluo cavalry, the Azure martial army, or the ultimate martial army, all of them had been created during the era of Tang dynasty Taizong. The Dragon Stallion army and Divine Martial army seemed to have been created by Sishan and Geshu Han, but they had also inherited the training methods of the previous generation, originating from Taizong's era. As for the Divine Prison army and Xuanwu army that Wang Chong had secretly trained, they had inherited the training methods of Taizong's era. After more than 100 years, the 9 strongest armies of the Tang dynasty Taizong had gathered for the first time on the battlefield of Talas to the west of the Tsong Mountains. And the 9 Dragon Blood War banner, which had been in obscurity for more than 100 years, once more began to shine. Thunderclouds began to churn, and the power of the 9 Dragon Blood War banner instantly swelled the strength of these 2 already extremely powerful armies. Rumble! Rumble! Accompanied by an unprecedentedly loud rumble, the entire world seemed to be torn apart. In the face of the repeated attacks of the Divine Martial, Divine Prison, Roaring Tiger, and Ultimate Martial armies, as well as the attacks of the Tongluo cavalry and Azure Martial army, Kotebua's Revelation army was utterly routed. In neigh, warhorses neighed as the Revelation army soldiers panicked. For the first time, they felt like they were trapped in an ocean, completely powerless to resist. Break the sharpest part of the spear, was one of the rules of war of the Revelation Army. This rule applied to all the opponents the Revelation Army had faced in the past, and it also applied to the Revelation Army itself. Bang! One of the Revelation Army soldiers was unable to dodge in time and was instantly surrounded. In a short period of time, at least 6 or 7 swords that were as heavy as 10,000 caddies chopped down on his body. Even though the Revelation Army soldiers were extremely powerful and Kateba had equipped them with the best equipment and armor, they still found it difficult to resist these destructive attacks. Aya! Aya! With a scream, a Revelation Army soldier vomited blood and collapsed to the ground along with his horse. Plush! As this Revelation Army soldier fell to the ground, a sword stabbed through his throat. A moment later, a silver boot stepped over his corpse and began to advance toward the other Revelation Army soldiers. 500, 600, 700, 1,000. In a few short moments, more than 1,000 Revelation Army soldiers had been slain. Not only that, as the Revelation Army soldiers fell, the Blood Beast Army and Death Army began to fall as well, sending a cloud of dust into the air. The Divine Prison Army, Divine Martial Army, and the other 2 armies had 7 dazzling halos around them. With the addition of the Tong Luo Cavalry and Azure Martial Army, the number of halos around them instantly rose from 7 to 9. The 9 top-class armies of the Tang dynasty, numbering more than 20,000 in total, swept toward the enemy. This time, it wasn't just the Revelation Army and Blood Beast Army. The Beheader Army, Tiber's Army, and the surrounding Arab cavalry were all within the range of the 9 Dragon Blood War banner. This time, the Arabs had truly been routed. Nay! On the battlefield, Arab horsemen screamed in fear as they fell to the ground. Blood rapidly filled the air, and to the west of Talas, rivers of blood flowed across the ground like a living hell. Fast. Too fast. Only a few moments had passed since the Tong Luo cavalry had attacked and the army had been routed. The Arab army was covered in casualties, and even the seemingly invincible Revelation Army had suffered severe losses. Chapter 11:19. The Arabian Empire had gathered so many elites, 3 governors, and hundreds of thousands of soldiers, but it had still been routed by the 20,000 soldiers of a trifling empire of the Eastern world. From their vantage point, they could see that these elite Arab horsemen were being tossed into the air like ragdolls by the 20,000 soldiers of the Tang dynasty. These Tang dynasty elites only needed to swing their swords to cleave the several thousand Jin Arab horsemen in 2 or send them flying several dozen meters. Although the Arabs had the advantage in numbers, no amount of soldiers could stop the edge of the Tang people. The bodies of the Tang people were dazzling and resplendent, as if they were miniature formations. Their vibration suppressed the radiance of all the other armies on the battlefield. No matter how many Arab cavalry charged at him, they were all thrown back like ants trying to shake a tree. Retreat. Pass on my order. All soldiers, retreat. At this moment, even Abu Muslim's expression was extremely grim. Abu Muslim had never imagined that an army of more than 200,000 soldiers would be suppressed like this. Abu Muslim had predicted that the worst-case scenario would be a slight disadvantage, but for some reason, the situation was not as disadvantageous as he had imagined. It was a complete rout. If they did not retreat, the Arabs would suffer even greater losses. Abu Muslim was known as the governor of iron and blood, and he was famed for his aggressive and fierce assaults on the battlefield. He would never retreat until he had utterly crushed his opponent. But now, the Arab morale was at rock bottom. If they did not retreat, the Arabs would not be able to endure the painful consequences. Gallop. Upon hearing Abu Muslim's order, one of the Arab horsemen quickly turned around and left. Wait a moment. Suddenly, an extremely cold and emotionless voice resounded in everyone's ears. Everyone trembled at this voice and turned to look at Qutayba. Even Abu Muslim turned to look. The Blood Beast Army, the Death Army, and the Revelation army were all soldiers under Kataba's command. If there was one person who had suffered the greatest losses in this battle, it was the governor of war, Kataba. It was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Everyone was waiting for Kataba's order. The 9-dragon blood war banner. Not far from the Arabs, Dalawan Ruozan suddenly spoke. What? Dalawan Ruozan's words caused all eyes to turn to him. That war banner is the 9-dragon blood war banner. Dalawan Ruozan repeated. His gaze swept over the distant space to that ancient war banner fluttering in the wind. More than 100 years ago, during the era of Taizong, the Tang dynasty, a war banner of the Tang dynasty was forged from deep-sea Xian metal and of star cores. This war banner could control 9 top-class armies and superimpose the halos of these armies so that a single army could simultaneously possess 9 powerful halos. It was precisely with this war banner that the Tang dynasty was unstoppable on the battlefield, defeating the Turkic Khaganate and splitting it in two. At the same time, it defeated the Goguryeo Empire, the Mengshi-Zhao Empire, the Shi, the Khitans, and even Arozan. Only then did the legend of the Tang dynasty begin to flourish. It was also at that time that the Tang dynasty became publicly acknowledged as the strongest country on the continent. Dalawan Ruozan sternly said. Unlike the generals, Dalawan Ruozan's martial arts were far less profound, but he was well versed in the scriptures and knew the histories, stories, and even unofficial histories of the surrounding countries like the back of his hand. The glorious past of Emperor Taizong of the Tang dynasty had quietly faded into oblivion, so much so that not even the Tang dynasty itself knew much about it. But Dalawan Ruozan had been able to gather some precious records of the Central Plains, including the records of that war from 100 years ago, to understand these matters like the back of his hand. The 9-dragon blood war banner. There was no doubt that this was a powerful legend inseparable from the glory of the Tang dynasty's Taizong era, and it was also the true number 1 artifact of the Tang dynasty. 9 of the strongest armies combined with the legendary 9-dragon blood war banner would probably cause even the Revelation army to suffer a crushing defeat. The Arabs' defeat was completely within reason. The Tang people were no longer just an army content in a corner of the world. What was displayed before everyone was the most glorious and powerful army of the Tang dynasty. Their true appearance was far more powerful than what the crowd had seen, known, or imagined. In a flash, Dalawan Ruozan's face turned extremely grave. With the banner of the Tang dynasty on the battlefield, the nature of this war had completely changed. If the records in that book are correct, we must seize the 9-dragon blood war banner. Otherwise, the ground armies will have no chance of winning this war. Dalawan Ruozan's gaze pierced through the vast army, immediately focusing on that muscular and giant-like figure standing in front of the steel walls and the red and black war banner fluttering in the wind in his hand. Dalawan Ruozan's eyes gradually turned sharp. Getting rid of the flag bearer was their last hope of turning defeat into victory. Pass on my order. All soldiers, retreat, die. At the same time, after what seemed like both a second and countless eons, Kataba's icy voice resounded in everyone's ears. Everyone was flabbergasted by these words. No one had expected that even the Revelation army had been routed, but Kataba was still persisting, and that he wanted all the soldiers to defend to the death. But as the strongest existence on the Arab side, Kataba's orders were not something they could lightly defy. Kill that war banner, and everything will naturally come to an end. Kataba's voice resounded in everyone's ears. Top-class great generals had extremely sharp eyes, and although Kataba had never been to the Central Plains and knew nothing about the formations of the Central Plains, he had almost instantly reached the same conclusion as Dalawan Ruozan. All fell silent. Kataba's words caused all eyes to turn to the battlefield. The sight of that massive red and black war banner fluttering in the wind instantly made the atmosphere subtly tense. Arabia had no such large-scale formations, but if everything was as Kataba said, perhaps they wouldn't even need to retreat. Clang! The clear cry of a sword resounded through the sky. While everyone else was still pondering Qutayba's words, Qutayba had already reached behind him in a blinding flash of golden light, grabbing that massive golden sword renowned throughout Arabia. Divine might. Gallop. Qutayba's warhorse, Victor, began to gallop forward under everyone's gazes. In a flash, the Arab soldiers parted like waves, opening a path for Qutayba. In the rear of the army, the morale that had been shaken by the defeat on the front lines and thrown into disarray by Qutayba's appearance instantly calmed down. At any time, Qutayba would always have an irreplaceable position in the Arab army. As long as Qutayba was present, all the Arab soldiers would firmly believe that Arabia would never lose. Buzz. Looking at the sudden appearance of the golden figure in the distance, the atmosphere suddenly became tense. Marquis, Qutayba has made his move. A messenger turned to Wang Chong, his voice brimming with nervousness. The name of Qutayba was far too intimidating for all the soldiers of the Tang dynasty. Even now, everyone still remembered how Qutayba had single-handedly overturned more than 1,000 steel walls and suppressed 4 Tang dynasty great generals. Even though the Tang dynasty had the upper hand and was using the 9-Dragon Blood War banner to completely crush the Arab army, no one dared to say that this formation could stop Qutayba's attacks. No one spoke behind the steel walls, but the atmosphere was extremely tense. Chonger, leave this Qutayba to me. At this moment, an elderly and vigorous voice resounded in Wang Chong's ear. Wang Chong saw a black blur out of the corner of his eye, and then a stalwart figure appeared in front of him. Master. Wang Chong was dazed for a moment, but then he immediately understood. The fierce winds caused the evil emperor's robes to flap in the wind and his long hair to dance in the wind. Wang Chong couldn't see the evil emperor's face, but he could see that his back was tall and straight, like a majestic mountain that exuded an imposing and firm aura. When Qutayba had ridden out from beneath the Black War banner, everyone had been a little uneasy, but the moment the evil emperor stepped out, all this unease and worry vanished. Even Gao Xianji and Qing Qianli had calmed down. Rumble. Qutayba's warhorse galloped faster and faster, the golden light on his body growing brighter and brighter. The enormous energy Qutayba was pouring into his warhorse made every step of the Victor feel like a thunderclap. The moment that the Victor began to charge, the winds howled and all sound vanished. The only thing left on the earth was the thunderous galloping of the Victor's hooves. It's Lord Qutayba. More and more Arab cavalry on the battlefield noticed this sight. 1, 2, 3, soon, the entire army had noticed and began to cheer. The cheers of Qutayba shook the heavens, instantly rousing the fallen morale. Qutayba. 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 Chapter 11:20. At this moment, even Daluan Ruozan and the others couldn't help but raise their eyebrows, and the mood on the battlefield instantly became tense. Although the 20,000 some elite Tang soldiers still held the initiative and continued to destroy the charging Arab cavalry, the Arabs, who had been on the verge of collapse, had clearly regained their footing. Buzz. At this moment, the evil emperor's robe shook as he suddenly stepped forward. His expression was calm and unperturbed, as if this was not a fierce battlefield, but a leisurely stroll through a garden. The evil emperor did not move very quickly, and to be more accurate, he was very slow. But in the blink of an eye, he had already stepped out of the defense line and into the fierce battlefield. Bzzz. The air twisted, and the evil emperor reappeared 10 some zhang away. Not even someone of Wang Chong's cultivation level had been able to see how he had vanished. Kill him. The sight of the unarmored and black-robed evil emperor made the 2 Arab horsemen believe that they had found their chance. Savage light in their eyes, they charged at the evil emperor from the left and right. But a moment later, when Ney was still several feet from the evil emperor, the 2 muscular and bursting with explosive power seemed to run into an invisible barrier and came to a sudden stop. Not only that, the 2 Arab horsemen on the left and right also seemed to be immobilized by the art of petrification. Their eyes could still move, and there was extreme fear in their deep pupils. However, their bodies were like statues, unable to move at all. As for the demonic emperor old man, he continued on his way as if he didn't see them, brushing past them. 1 step, 2 steps. The evil emperor had already vanished, but the 2 Arab horsemen were still unable to move. Pong, after an unknown amount of time, there were 2 consecutive earth-shattering booms. Suddenly, an unparalleled force shot out from their backs. This force was not colorless and transparent, but was as red as blood. Bang! Bang! The 2 of them fell heavily to the ground, stirring up a cloud of smoke and dust. They died on the spot. The demonic emperor old man's myriad spirit sea art had reached the pinnacle, reaching a level that ordinary people found difficult to comprehend. Even in death, these 2 Arab horsemen did not understand how the demonic emperor old man, who had never touched them, had managed to kill them. Boom! 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 As they traversed the hellish battlefield, Arab cavalry, unaware of the truth, roared and charged at them. But every time, before they could get close, they would hear a heaven-shaking explosion. At the same time, countless Arab cavalry would be thrown more than 100 meters into the air, but before they could even hit the ground, they were already dead. In front of a terrifying expert like the demonic emperor old man, these so-called elites of the Great Tang were far too weak. The evil emperor didn't even need to touch them to kill them easily. Even the distant great generals of the Arab and Yusang empires were moved by such a powerful display of strength. Where did this person come from? Even Qutayba is rather cautious around him. Aibak sternly said. Even now, he still remembered how Qutayba had single-handedly suppressed the Tang army when he first fought. If nothing unexpected had happened, the Arabs should have won back then, until this mysterious black-robed elder had appeared. For a powerful existence like Qutayba to not attack this black-robed elder for a very long time was simply inconceivable, given his personality. It had to be known that even in front of great generals like Abu Muslim and Aibak, Qutayba had never had a good expression. His style had always been extremely domineering, and it was almost impossible to make him stop in his anger. There was no doubt that this mysterious black-robed elder had reached a certain level of strength. I don't know. In the current situation, we can only trust in Qutayba. If not even he can defeat that person, there's nothing we can do. Abu Muslim continued to stare ahead, not even turning his head. Before his voice faded away, he squeezed his horse's abdomen, and the horse immediately rode out from under the black war flag. Ziad, Aibak, Osman, all of you heard what Qutayba said just now. No matter what, seize that banner or kill that person. If we want to break the current situation, we must destroy the Tang people's formation. With these words, Abu Muslim pulled on the reins of his horse and vanished into the vast army. Yes. Ziad took in a deep breath, his expression turning extremely grave as he viciously glared at the top-class Tang dynasty army. As long as these Tang dynasty soldiers did not truly possess this level of cultivation, but relied on external tools, then even if they destroyed their formation, they could still turn defeat into victory. Huishu Wizang, Dusong Mangpoj, get ready. Qutayba and Abu Muslim have already entered the field. We will probably need to use our strength in this battle. At the same time, nearby, Daluan Ruozan spoke, his azure robes fluttering in the wind. His eyes were profound, countless thoughts flitting through them. With the addition of those 2 mysterious elders, the Great Tang situation had completely changed. The Arabs alone would find it very difficult to gain the upper hand in a battle between great generals. As allies with a common enemy and goal, it was time for Uzan to play his role. Understood. Huishu Wizang pressed his right hand against the saber at his waist as he took 2 steps forward. At the same time, Dusong Mangpoj rode forward. The mood on the battlefield was only getting more and more tense. Wang Chong, Qianli, leave Abu Muslim to me. The rest of you deal with the rest. At the same time, on the other end of the battlefield, Gao Xianji looked at Abu Muslim, his eyes flashing as he spoke. The void was silent. Both of them nodded in tacit understanding. Without any hesitation, Gao Xianji suddenly squeezed the horse's abdomen and galloped forward. On the battlefield, the 20,000-some elite soldiers of the Tang dynasty had gathered around the Nine-Dragon Blood War banner and were sweeping through the surrounding foes. The Tang dynasty still held the initiative on the battlefield, but even someone like Commander Chulu had noticed the massive shift in the battlefield. In the distance, Kateba and the evil emperor were getting closer and closer, the air growing more and more tense. 100 feet, 60 feet, 50 feet, when they were still around 20 feet from each other, the two of them stopped in unison. One was riding a mighty warhorse, like a god exiled to the mortal world, while the other was dressed in a wide-sleeved robe. Although he was not as dazzling as Kateba's, his imposing figure was like the most majestic mountain in the world, enough to make anyone shrink back at the sight of him. Their eyes reflected each other's figure, and neither of them moved. Buzz! Powerful auras burst out from the two of them like tsunamis and landslides. Although the two of them did not make a move, everyone could feel the dangerous atmosphere. The surrounding soldiers had already unknowingly retreated like the tide, leaving a large empty space around the two of them. Kill! After some time, the Arab horsemen began to howl and charge from all sides, their scimitars swinging. For Lord Governor! Kill this Tang people! Shouts and shouts in Arabic resounded over the battlefield. Qutayba had extremely high prestige in the army, and the Arab cavalry almost instinctively sensed an opportunity when they saw that the two were locked in a stalemate. They wanted to use their advantage in numbers to attack the evil emperor and create an opportunity for Qutayba. At this sight, the demonic emperor old man finally moved, but it was only a slight twitch of his brow. His hands remained motionless at his sides. Boom! When they were still 3 feet from the evil emperor suddenly unleashed thousands of bolts of energy that crisscrossed in the air around him. Swish swish swish. Before these elite Arab cavalry could even reach the evil emperor, they were pierced through by those bolts of energy. Their powerful armor made by the best Arab craftsmen was like paper in the face of those bolts of energy, instantly pulverizing and shattering. Buzz! At this moment, a dreadful killing intent flashed through the air. Qutayba, seated on his victor, had clenched his 5 fingers and was ready to strike. Boom! A streak of golden sword chi rose from the ground in an instant, piercing through the void. At this moment, even the sky seemed to be cleaved in two by this sword, leaving a long, mirror-like scar in the sky. Only now did the thunderous boom of the attack come from the sky. Qutayba's attack was swift and heavy to the extreme. If this sword were to fall, a mountain or a fortress would be cleaved in two, much less a person's body of flesh and blood. The moment Qutayba attacked, the demonic emperor old man finally struck. In the face of Qutayba's mountain-cleaving attack, the demonic emperor old man did not use any weapon, only thrust out his bloody palm. In the blink of an eye, something strange happened. Boom! Under the gazes of countless people, the void exploded, sending out thousands of powerful shockwaves. In the blink of an eye, thousands of bolts of energy appeared around the evil emperor's body. These bolts of energy varied in length, but together, they formed an enormous forest of energy that surrounded the evil emperor. If one looked carefully, one would see that almost every pore on the evil emperor's body was spitting out bolts of energy. Buzz! The demonic emperor old man's expression was solemn. With a wave of his finger, the thousands of bolts of energy gathered into a massive sword that slammed into Qutayba's sword chi. Rumble. Chapter 11:21. Ah! Screams filled the air as all the Arab cavalry within several hundred zhang of the clash between the evil emperor and Qutayba were instantly dealt a destructive blow. The shockwaves from their clash swept away all the Arab cavalry in the area like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. Thousands of Arab cavalry were sent flying through the air, their faces stricken with fear as they were swept away like ragdolls. Some of them were even sent flying into the distance, their bodies unable to stop themselves from crashing into the ground. Thud thud thud. In just a short period of time, the rocks on the ground cracked and blood gushed out like a waterfall. Countless warriors howled miserably as they were turned into cold corpses in the battle between the two of them, scattered all over the ground like stars in the sky. In the middle of the battlefield, not only did the billowing smoke and dust not calm down, it became even thicker, wave after wave shooting up into the sky. Within the dense smoke and dust, two figures, one gold and one black, were rapidly entangled as they engaged in an intense battle. Boom boom boom. Golden bolts of sword chi cleaved through the earth, piercing through the clouds. At the same time, innumerable sharp bolts of energy, even more terrifying than actual swords and sabers, were also exploding. Strength on the level of the evil emperor Nkataba had far surpassed the imagination of mortals. Even the imperial great generals, who stood at the apex of martial artists, couldn't help but tremble in fear at this sight, a feeling of inferiority rising up in their hearts. Pooh! In the blink of an eye, a gigantic storm formed from golden sword chi, myriad spirit sea arts chi, dust, and sand rapidly appeared before everyone's eyes, spiraling into the sky. Bang, bang, bang. Wave after wave of explosions rose and fell, turning this area into the most dangerous area. Retreat! Retreat! The Arab cavalry panicked and pulled on their reins as they fled into the distance. These two, how could this be? At this moment, even his allies, Wuxia Wuzong and Dusong Mengpoj, couldn't help but clench their fists in deep shock. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they would have found it very difficult to imagine that this battle had reached this level. Although they were both great generals, Nkataba and the mysterious elder were clearly far stronger than they could comprehend. While the entire battlefield was shocked by the two of them, on the other side of the battlefield, a tall and sturdy figure rode over on a horse. Gao Xianji, we meet again. Do you think that you can stop me? When they were still several dozen feet away, Abu Muslim pulled on the reins and spoke in the language of the Tang dynasty. The two were old rivals, and it had been 4 months since this stalemate began. Abu Muslim had a rather good understanding of Gao Xianji. But you've already lost. Gao Xianji faintly smiled. The Revelation Army had already been defeated, as had the Death Army and Fearless Army. If everything went as expected, the Tang dynasty would emerge victorious in the end. To borrow the words of you Central Plains people, it's still unknown who will emerge victorious. Abu Muslim grinned. Moreover, you're no match for me. This was not their first clash. Since Gao Xianji had been no match for him in the past, he was naturally no match for him now. It was simply impossible for Gao Xianji to rely on his own strength to stop him. Since you know a few proverbs of the Central Plains, I'll give you a few words of advice. Don't laugh too early until the very end. Gao Xianji faintly smiled. He had heard this saying from Wang Chong, the one who laughs last laughs best. Buzz. Abu Muslim's eyes chilled at these words, and a terrifying killing intent exploded out of him. Without the slightest hesitation, Abu Muslim put on the special eye of the demon god glove and punched. Asmodee's fury. Without the slightest hesitation, Abu Muslim immediately used the supreme art of the 72 demon god pillar art. When Abu Muslim had used this technique with the eye of the demon god, even the consecrated under Wang Chong's control had been forced to stagger, much less anyone else. Abu Muslim might not be as strong as Nkataba, but there was no question that he was one of the best. At the very least, the number of people on the side of the Tang dynasty who could compare to him could be counted on one's fingers. Rumble. The skies suddenly darkened, and then Abu Muslim's body vanished, replaced by a purple and black armored demon god with 3 heads. This demon god stood on the ground and punched a mountainous fist at Gao Xianji. This unstoppable punch had stirred up a fierce gale for a radius of 100 zhang. Bang bang bang. The Arab corpses on the ground were thrown into the air by this fierce gale of energy and sent flying backward. Ha! Gao Xianji's eyes flashed, and a faint smile appeared on his lips. 8. G. Bang! Crack! Art! Gao Xianji's loud voice resounded in everyone's ears, each word like a peal of thunder. A moment later, as Abu Muslim stared in shock, the wind blew and he vanished. Rumble. A second later, in the sky several dozen zhang from where Gao Xianji had been standing, blazing bolts of lightning crackled as Gao Xianji's body appeared. Around him, light and shadow fluctuated, revealing 8 huge pitch-black pillars. The surface of the 8 pillars was engraved with mysterious ancient inscriptions, and in the center of the 8 mysterious ancient pillars, the void distorted. In the blink of an eye, a miniature topography of the entire continent was revealed. At first glance, everyone could sense a thick and boundlessly powerful aura. It was as if it wasn't just light and shadow, but was connected to the entire earth. The 8 ultimate sunderings art was a technique that Wang Chong had given him, and it had been born out of Gao Xianji's own 6 ultimate majesties god art. The two came from the same source. When one reached a certain level in martial arts, one would no longer be restricted by the transformation of one's weapon. For example, Wang Chong could use a sword, but he could also use a spear, a pike, and when he transformed into the god King Yama, he could also use a vajra pestle. Gao Xianji's 6 ultimate majesties god art was primarily based on sword qi, but now that it had been upgraded to the 8 ultimate sunderings art, there was no longer any need for weapons. But although this supreme art was powerful, it was also extremely difficult to cultivate. At the very least, Gao Xianji had comprehended this theory, but he had never been able to cultivate it. Although Wang Chong had given him a month to cultivate in seclusion, Gao Xianji had never been able to fully cultivate it. Not long ago, when the evil emperor had arrived, Gao Xianji had asked him about the essence of qi, and only then had he completely comprehended this even more powerful 8 ultimate sunderings art. Humph, do you think that you can fight against me like this? Abu Muslim's eyes chilled, and a moment later, the Asmodee's fury that Abu Muslim had just fired suddenly changed directions and shot toward Gao Xianji. At almost the same time, Gao Xianji spread open his fingers, sending 8 black pillars of inscription flying through the air toward Abu Muslim's left, and right. When Abu Muslim's Asmodee's fury was still several dozen feet from Gao Xianji, Abu Muslim's strongest attack suddenly froze in the air. How could this be? Abu Muslim was flabbergasted by this sight. His fist energy and technique were formless and invisible. Unless they were sabers or swords, they should have been impossible to grasp. For Gao Xianji to be able to freeze his fist energy in the air was completely beyond Abu Muslim's understanding and inconceivable. As this thought flitted through Abu Muslim's mind, the 8 black pillars of inscription suddenly exploded with power. There was a heaven-shaking boom as Abu Muslim's full-strength punch was suddenly shattered by a terrifying energy and completely obliterated. Fierce winds blew down from the sky, and Abu Muslim paled at this sight. He had never imagined that Gao Xianji would be able to cultivate a new technique in just 1 month, and that he would be able to use these 8 strange pillars to completely shatter his strongest attack. Abu Muslim, that was then, and this is now. No matter what you want to do, as long as I am here, you will never succeed. A loud and clear voice came from the sky like rolling thunder. Gao Xianji stepped out. At the same time, a majestic sword qi burst out from his feet. The sword qi condensed and quickly turned into another black pillar of inscriptions. It floated in the air and supported Gao Xianji's body at the same time. The sky was a forbidden zone for martial artists, but to Gao Xianji, it was like walking on flat ground. With this step, Gao Xianji's understanding of the 8 ultimate sunderings art deepened. Martial path, sword qi, and all sorts of rules were integrated in his mind. In an instant, a tremendous aura surged, like a storm, exploding from his body. Gao Xianji, who was already very strong to begin with, instantly broke through some sort of bottleneck and reached an even higher level. Gao Xianji finally had the right to directly face Abu Muslim. All was silent. Abu Muslim looked up at Gao Xianji in the sky, sensing the rising energy coming from his body, and his face instantly turned steely and nasty. Huishu Wuzong, go. Duluan Ruozen's eyes flashed when he saw that Qutayba and Abu Muslim had been stopped, and he immediately gave the order. This battle was not just related to Arabia, but also to Uzan. No matter what, they had to defeat the Tang dynasty, and if they wanted to destroy the Tang dynasty's 9-dragon blood formation, they needed an imperial great general. Understood. Chapter 1123. Chong'er, leave Huishu Wuzong to me. A dignified and vigorous voice came from behind him. At some point, Wang Yan had appeared at Wang Chang's side. As he gazed at the approaching Huishu Wuzong, a sharp light flashed through his eyes. Before Wang Chong could reply, Wang Yan immediately strode out from behind the first defense line. Behind him, there were tens of thousands of infantrymen in strict formation, following closely as they stepped out together. Wang Chong, I'm going to help General Wang. Su Hanshan sternly said as he walked up to Wang Chong and stared at Wang Yan's back. Wang Yan was Wang Chong's father, and although Su Hanshan had no doubts about Wang Yan's strength, there was no harm in being cautious. Dispatching 5,000 ballista soldiers would be able to intimidate the Arab cavalry. This was especially true now that the Tang dynasty had taken the initiative. With the 9-dragon blood war banner and the 5,000 ballista soldiers, this massive system of warfare would only get stronger and stronger, and its ability to intimidate the Arabs would only get stronger and stronger. Wang Chong assessed the situation and nodded. The opportunity had come. Although the Tang dynasty had been on the defensive throughout the Battle of Talas, relying on its long steel defense line to await an attack, the opportunity to counterattack had come. The Tang dynasty no longer needed to defend and could attack instead of defend. Creak. Creak. With a clatter of gears, the 5,000 Tang dynasty ballistae under Su Hanshan's command passed through the gaps in the steel walls and followed Wang Yan's infantry. Release. Before the other Arab cavalry could charge, Su Hanshan waved his arm, sending 5,000 ballista bolts flying over Wang Yan's army, past the 9-dragon blood war banner and the 20,000 some elite soldiers of the Tang dynasty, and into the Arab cavalry. Plush plush plush. Countless Arab cavalry screamed as they were pierced through by the sharp ballista bolts and dropped to the ground. Forward. With a wave of his sword, Su Hanshan led the army forward, pushing the ballistae past the corpses. The 5,000 Tang dynasty ballistae in his hands formed a hedgehog formation. Although the ballista army's defensive power was very low, considering that Su Hanshan had trained these soldiers to be brigands and highwaymen, if the ballista army were to break through their defenses, they would suffer grievous casualties. But in Su Hanshan's hands, even the most elite army of the Tang dynasty would find it extremely difficult to cross the range of the ballistae. The sharp attack itself was the best defense. Fan formation. Traversing through space and arriving near the 9-dragon blood battle formation, Su Hanshan waved his sword and issued another order. 5,000 Tang dynasty ballistae poured out like water, perfectly encompassing the 9-dragon blood formation and the infantry formation led by Wang Chong's father, Wang Yan. Together, the three armies formed a compact and powerful system. Even though Su Hanshan's strength was still far from reaching that level, in terms of strategy, Su Hanshan had already revealed the qualities of a future great general. Gallop. Wang Yan did not pay attention to the changes behind him. Looking at that familiar figure, he suddenly squeezed the horse's abdomen and urged it forward. Wang, there was a flash of light, and in the process of advancing, Wang Yan suddenly disappeared. In his place was a deep black light that burst forth and rapidly expanded. Roar. There was a heaven-shaking roar, and in the blink of an eye, a massive golden-armored god appeared on the battlefield. With a single step, he covered 10 some meters as he strode toward Wuxia Huizong. The aura exuded by the golden-armored god was extremely powerful, and his massive body dwarfed all the great Tang elites on the battlefield, like fireflies before the bright moon, insignificant and insignificant. On the other side, Wuxia Huizong raised his brows at the sight of the mighty miracle god and the rumbling of the earth. He immediately used the Vairocana Buddha golden body mantra. In the blink of an eye, a gigantic Buddha appeared on the battlefield, its entire body bursting with a golden light. It was as mighty as hell. As he stared at the distant Wang Yan, Wuxia Huizong's entire body exploded with a heaven-shaking fighting intent, and he quickened his pace as he charged forward. At almost the same time, Wang Yan's eyes flashed with cold light as he controlled the mighty miracle god to quicken its pace. Rumble. 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 The two mortal enemies of the southwest had once more met on the foreign battlefield of Talas. One viewed Wuxia Huizong as a long-term threat to the Tang dynasty, an invader, the creator of calamity, and a powerful imperial great general. The other vowed to wash away the humiliation of the southwest. Rumble. A moment later, the entire world seemed to tear apart. As countless people watched, Wuxia Huizong and Wang Yan, one gold and one black, two enormous figures, collided on the battlefield. In a flash, winds howled, sand flew, and pebbles flew as a peerless shockwave shook the entire battlefield. In the distance, Daluan Ruozhen almost imperceptibly creased his brow at this sight. He had been paying attention to Wuxia Huizong this entire time, but based on the situation on the battlefield, it was clear that Wuxia Huizong would not be able to defeat Wang Yan in the short term. "Dusong Mengpoj, you go." Daluan Ruozhen suddenly said without turning his head. Dusong Mengpoj said nothing, his eyes fixed on the place where the evil emperor and Kateba were fighting, his fists clenched, his eyes flashing with light. "I know what you're thinking, but now is not the time. Acting rashly will only waste all our efforts." Daluan Ruozhen sternly said. "Understood." Dusong Mengpoj took in a deep breath and finally calmed his mind. He urged his horse forward and galloped toward the 9-dragon blood war banner, his armor clattering as he brushed past Daluan Ruozhen and vanished into the distance. Bastard! The leader of the Mamelukes, Ibak, was also watching the battlefield. As Kateba, Abu Muslim, and Wuxia Huizong were stopped by the Tang dynasty, Ibak's expression was cold, his eyes brimming with killing intent. "Hear my order. All soldiers, move out. I don't believe that there's a formation that my Mamluk army can't break." Ibak clicked his fingers together as he grabbed a nearby warhorse and mounted it. Clang! Ibak's right leg lightly kicked against the back of his horse. There was a metallic clatter as an enormous halo exploded from Ibak's foot and spread to the feet of all the Mamelukes. Pharaoh Halo. This dazzling dark red halo was ancient and powerful, and in Ibak's hands, it was more than twice as powerful as Faisal's. Clang clang clang. The power of this supreme Pharaoh halo caused the defense, speed, and dexterity of the Mamluk army to rapidly rise. Ibak's eyes were as sharp as knives as he glared at the distant 9-dragon blood war banner. With a wave of his sword, more than 4,000 Mamelukes exploded forward like a torrent of mercury. Clang! Not long after Ibak moved out, Ziad took in a deep breath, took out the ocean ring, and mounted a warhorse. "I'd like to see just how much ability you have and just how many of us you can stop." Ziad was also infuriated. The Arabs were proud and confident. This battle was no longer just about the strategic fortress of the Silk Road. It was also a clash of momentum, strength, and confidence between Arabia and the Tang dynasty, between the West and the East. No matter what, Arabia could not lose to these countries of the East. Ney and Ziad rode forward, leaving a trail of dust in their wake as they vanished from beneath the black Arabian war banner and into the roiling battlefield. "Ziad has moved out. Leave this person to me. Qing Qinli suddenly pulled out his sword with a clang and looked into the distance. His eyes had been focused this entire time, and he had noticed Ziad the moment he moved out. The two of them had fought more than once, and Qing Qinli knew Ziad's martial arts and fighting style like the back of his hand. There was no better candidate to capture Ziad than him. Wang Chong nodded and turned his head to look at Aibak and the 7,000 Mamelukes charging over, as well as the Celestial Wolf Cavalry and Mutri Great Cavalry who had noticed the change in the situation and followed. In yesterday's battle, the Mutri Great Cavalry and Celestial Wolf Cavalry had suffered the greatest losses. Although they were also top-class cavalry, the weapons and equipment of the Mutri Great Cavalry and Celestial Wolf Cavalry were far inferior to those of the Mamelukes and Wuxian Cavalry, which was why they had suffered such heavy losses. But even so, the three armies added together still had an astonishing number of 12,000 soldiers. Wuxian Cavalry, hear my order. Follow me. Wang Chang's eyes flashed with cold light as he immediately gave the order. Aibak had already begun to move, and under the power of his halo, the strength of the 7,000 Mamelukes swelled to an astonishing level. This was the true Pharaoh halo. Cui Piaoqi and Banahan alone would not be able to stop it. Let us see whether the true Pharaoh halo is stronger or the Azura Hell formation is stronger. Wang Chang's eyes flashed with intense light as he urged his horse forward, galloping out from beneath the Tang Dynasty war banner. Chapter 1124. Awu. The temperature in a radius of several thousand zhang plummeted as cold winds swept through the world. Without any warning, everyone heard a heaven-shaking howl, like countless vengeful spirits writhing and screaming in the depths of hell. Anyone who heard this sound would feel an intense fear that came from the depths of their hearts. Clop clop clop. The dense sounds of horse hooves were as heavy as thunder. They quickly moved from the first defense line to the battlefield in the distance. In the churning dust, Wang Chong led all the Wuxian cavalry forward like a comet, unstoppable as they charged toward Aibak and the strongest cavalry of the three empires. Daluan Ruozhen had been paying close attention this entire time. As he watched Wang Chong lead the 7,000 Wuxian cavalry in a charge that was not one bit inferior to the cavalry of the three great empires, a hint of deep concern flashed through his eyes. Uzun had no path of retreat. The Arabs had invested so many soldiers that victory was inevitable. No matter what, they had to destroy the 9 Dragon Blood War banner, destroy the greatest reliance of the Tang people. But Uzun had sent out all his generals, and the three empires did not have many great generals left. Other than Governor Osman of Cairo, who was nervously watching the battle and ready to move at any moment, there was only one person left. Ha ha ha, it seems like I'm the only one left in this battle. Suddenly, Daluan Ruozhen roared with laughter. Before Daluan Ruozhen could speak, Duwu Sili seemed to have predicted what Daluan Ruozhen was going to say and galloped forward. Daluan Ruozhen was stunned, momentarily speechless. Duwu Sili had always been a crafty individual. If he could hide until the very end, he would never strike first. Moreover, his every move had a clear goal in mind. But now, before he could say anything, Duwu Sili had come forward. This had truly taken him by surprise. For the first time, Daluan Ruozhen found himself unable to grasp Duwu Sili's goal. But no matter what Daluan Ruozhen thought, Haya. A bellow resounded in Duwu Sili's ear, followed by the clattering of hooves. His glossy black steed brushed past Daluan Ruozhen and entered the fierce battlefield. It seems like I have to go. The only person behind the defense line who had not yet moved was Chief of Wuxian. Although the Chief of Wuxian was powerful, he was still very old, much older than his master, the evil emperor. This was why Wang Chong had arranged for him to come last. Although he was powerful in martial arts, the Chief of Wuxian was not good at leading troops in battle. At least, it was impossible for the Chief of Wuxian to lead the Wuxian Iron Cavalry in a charge. Therefore, in the end, only the Chief of Wuxian could deal with Duwu Sili. The chief of Wuxiang's white walking stick paused and immediately walked out from behind the first defense line. Boom! In the blink of an eye, just as the chief of Wuxiang walked out from behind the gaps in the defense line, a strong wind suddenly howled. A destructive force suddenly shot toward the chief of Wuxiang like lightning. Boom! In the blink of an eye, it collided heavily with the chief of Wuxiang's righteous qi. At that moment, everyone could clearly see that the arrow shooting at the Wuxiang village chief was a specially made arrow as thick as a finger and more than 5 feet long. The arrow streaked through the void, leaving a white scar that was more than 20 meters long behind it. It took a long time for the arrow to heal. From this, one could see that the person who had struck the arrow had reached an inconceivable level of strength. But even more astonishing was the change that occurred after the arrow struck the chief of Wuxiang. As everyone watched, that 5-foot-long arrow seemed to encounter an unprecedented obstacle in the air. The arrow froze in the air, unable to advance even an inch. Crack, crack, crack. In the next moment, under the gazes of countless people, the 5-foot-long arrow began to break inch by inch, starting from the arrowhead. In the blink of an eye, the arrow forged from deep-sea Xian iron had been reduced to powder. Even in the end, the arrow had failed to get within 3 feet of the chief of Wuxiang. Buzz! Countless high-ranking Arabuzan and Western Turkic generals were stunned by this sight. This white-haired elder of the Tang dynasty was over 70 years old and was leaning on a cane. It seemed like he could collapse at any moment. No one had expected him to be so powerful that he could block a 3-foot-long arrow with just the stellar energy around his body. The chief of Wuxiang said nothing, only raised his head and looked at Shamshak. Shamshak was also stunned. He had never imagined that this old man would be so terrifying. Even though he was a brigadier general, this arrow had failed to even wound him. Ha! The chief of Wuxiang softly sighed, and then he extended a finger out of his sleeve and flicked it. Pa! Not far from the chief of Wuxiang's feet, a halberd stabbed into the corpses of several Arab horsemen suddenly shot through the air. As if pulled by some invisible energy, it shot toward Shamshak. Not good. The chief of Wuxiang had just raised his hand when Shamshak barely saw his sleeve shake. He didn't even know what exactly he had done. A moment later, Shamshak felt his scalp go numb and his body go numb from extreme danger. There was no time to think. Shamask's body leaned back, and in the blink of an eye, he tumbled off the back of his horse in a rather wretched manner. Boom! The moment Shamshak tumbled off his horse, a broken halberd brushed past the back of his horse and slammed into the army behind Shamshak. In an instant, there was an earth-shattering sound as the halberd landed on the ground, triggering a series of intense explosions. Several dozen Arab cavalry didn't even have time to grunt before they were blown to pieces. Even their armor and scimitars had been pulverized into powder. Shamshak broke out in a cold sweat. Killing several dozen Arab horsemen in a single blow was no problem for him, but pulverizing their tough armor was impossible. If he hadn't reacted so quickly and rolled off his horse, he would already be a corpse. Nay! As Shamshak breathed a sigh of relief, he suddenly heard the screech of a dying warhorse. Shamask was startled and subconsciously turned his head, only to see that tall and sturdy warhorse that had accompanied him for 10-some years topple to the ground with a thud. And its back had disappeared at some point. Shamshak's face instantly turned ghastly pale. But no matter what Shamshak was thinking, there was a flash of light in the distance. Gallop! Gallop! Using the celestial wolf's divine procession, Dewussili strode through the air like a storm as he charged toward the 9-dragon blood war banner and the chief of Wuxiang. His heroic aura, his black cloak flapping in the wind, and his sharp eyes were enough to make anyone with a weak will tremble in fear and dread. Young friend, stop! As Dewussili was charging into the distance, a white-haired figure leaning on a cane suddenly appeared in front of Dewussili. No one knew how the chief of Wuxiang had appeared, but he seemed to have encountered no obstacles in his path. Even the Arab cavalry behind him were dumbfounded, not knowing what was going on. The celestial wolf Great General Wuxia was famous throughout the Western Turks and the Central Plains, but in the mouth of the chief of Wuxiang, he was just a young friend. In terms of age, Wuxia truly was much younger than him. Ha! Across from the chief of Wuxiang, Wuxia rode his black Turkic steed through the air. The winds howled as the mane of Wuxia's horse danced in the wind, and even Wuxia's hair danced in the wind. An enigmatic and wicked smile appeared on Wuxia's lips as he stared at the chief of Wuxiang. The chief of Wuxiang narrowed his eyes. Just when he believed that Wuxia was about to unleash some powerful move, the situation suddenly changed. Boom! Before the chief of Wuxiang could react, Wuxia shot into the air like a bolt of lightning, drawing a massive arc through the air as he charged toward the rear. In the blink of an eye, he had vanished from the battlefield. Even though the chief of Wuxiang had weathered many storms and had long since passed the age when he would be easily swayed by external forces, he was still left dumbfounded by this sight. Wuxia had come with such a heroic air that the chief of Wuxiang had mentally prepared himself for a major battle. He had never expected that Wuxia would flee without a fight. What is Wuxia doing? At that moment, not only the chief of Wuxiang, but even the adjutant next to Daluan Ruozhen was dumbfounded. They had no idea what was going on. Daluan Ruozhen did not say anything. His brows were also furrowed. It doesn't matter what Wuxia does. Whether he flees or fights, he has already achieved his goal. Daluan Ruozhen pondered for a moment and suddenly said, "Ah!" The adjutant was instantly stunned. In the distance, the chief of Wuxiang had yet to understand what Wuxia was up to when an anxious shout suddenly rang through the battlefield. "Oh no! It's Governor Osman of Cairo." Chapter 11:25. In the distance, a stalwart figure had suddenly appeared in front of the 9-dragon blood war banner. This man had a body as muscular as a bear. He had been concealing his aura and hiding in the crowd this entire time, so that no one would notice him. Only now did he fiercely erupt with his energy. Not good. The chief of Wuxiang's mind froze as he realized what was going on. Wuxia hadn't been afraid or fleeing. He had been luring the tiger away from the mountain. This was because his goal had never been to fight him, but to lure him away. Buzz! Without the slightest hesitation, the chief of Wuxiang turned his head and began to fly away. The chief of Wuxiang was far from the only one to notice this change on the battlefield. Wang Chong, Gao Xianji, Qing Qianli, and everyone else also noticed. But it was too late. Osman had moved even earlier than Wuxia. Before Wuxia had even entered the fray, Governor Osman had already vanished from beneath the Black Nile war banner by a hair's breadth. Wuxia had succeeded in attracting the attention of the chief of Wuxiang, and Osman had succeeded in concealing his aura and approaching the 9-dragon blood war banner. Ha ha ha, a bunch of ants. Once I seize this banner, I'd like to see how you'll resist. Governor Osman rode his black Arabian steed, his beard trembling in the wind as he exuded a vigorous aura. No matter how many tricks the Tang dynasty had up its sleeves, no matter how many ritual tools they had, the West would prevail over the East, and in the end, Arabia would be the final victor. Stop him. Don't let him get close. Anxious roars shook the heavens and earth. Seeing Governor Osman suddenly appear like a ghost, the Divine Martial Army, Divine Prison Army, Roaring Tiger Army, everyone's expressions changed. In an instant, countless soldiers brandished their swords and charged at Governor Osman from all directions like a tidal wave. General Wang, General Du, let's join forces. We can't let him threaten the war flag. Sensing the unfathomably terrifying aura emanating from Osman, Zhao Fengchen's expression immediately changed. In terms of cultivation, this imperial great general had undoubtedly reached an extremely high level. Even in the palace of the Tang dynasty, he was not inferior to the 3 commanders of the imperial army. In that instant, Zhao Fengchen felt an unprecedented sense of danger. Boom! Without any hesitation, Zhao Fengchen clasped his hands together, grasped the earth scar, and executed his strongest technique. Fury of Thunder. Moon-devouring greedy wolf. White tiger supports the heavens. Almost at the same time, greedy wolf battle General Wang Sili, roaring tiger army Du Wuwei, and several other captains abandoned their respective opponents and flew toward Governor Osman. All sorts of powerful techniques bombarded Osman like a thunderstorm. Ignorant. In the face of this vast sea of top-class soldiers of the Tang dynasty, as well as Zhao Fengchen, Wang Sili, and Du Wuwei, Osman only shot them a disdainful glance. No matter how powerful his opponent was, even the strongest brigadier general, as long as they had not broken through to that level, they could not truly contend against an imperial great general. In the next moment, without any hesitation, a massive, destructive force erupted from his body like a storm. Calamity of the Crocodile. In a flash, Osman used one of his most powerful techniques. In an instant, the space behind him changed, and a black flood appeared where Osman was standing. And in the middle of this mighty black torrent, two fierce eyes suddenly opened. Under the gaze of countless pairs of eyes, a huge crocodile, more than 100 feet long, suddenly woke up from its slumber. The god of the Nile. This was the most revered god in all of Cairo and all of Egypt. It was rumored that every year, from the 3rd to the 6th month, this god of the Nile would awaken and unleash a vast flood that would inundate tens of thousands of acres of fertile land and houses. Osman's calamity of the crocodile had been created from this essence. Once Osman used this technique, it would be like the waters of the Nile, endlessly surging in wave after wave. Moreover, this energy was brimming with destructive energy. Osman had used this technique to kill countless top-class experts in his war with the Sassanid dynasty, and the energy had even pulverized their armor. Bang! This one move caused screams to ring out. In front of Osman's unstoppable flood of black energy, countless soldiers of the ultimate martial army, divine prison army, roaring tiger army, were sent flying. Even with the support of the 9-dragon blood war banner and the 9 halos, in front of a top-class imperial great general like Osman, all his attacks and defenses were laughable and feeble. Zhao Fengchen, Wang Sili, Du Wuwei, and the others were only able to last for a few moments before they were sent flying by Osman's mountain-toppling attack. Plush! While still in the air, the 3 of them vomited blood, their faces as pale as paper. Osman's palm had heavily wounded their ribs. Everyone, hear my order. Charge with me. Osman's eyes flashed with cold light. His palm strike had torn a hole in the 9-dragon blood formation, but he didn't immediately chase after Zhao Fengchen, Du Wuwei, Wang Sili, and the others. Instead, he gathered his troops and had them charge in with him. The Arabs still had many top-class soldiers around the 9-dragon blood formation, including the Revelation Army, the Blood Beast Army, and the Death Army. These were all forces that Osman could use. On the battlefield, the Arabs, Uzan, and Western Turks still had the advantage in numbers. Osman's mind was extremely calm. The goal of this battle was not to kill or injure the Tang dynasty, but to destroy the 9-dragon blood war banner. Only by destroying this war banner would the Tang dynasty's formation collapse, making it impossible for it to threaten the Arab soldiers. Buzz! Osman's eyes reflected the giant red and black war flag. The moment he blasted through the gap, Osman didn't hesitate to shoot out like lightning towards the center of the formation, where the black armored guard stood motionless. Release! Su Hanshan suddenly shouted. He had sensed the danger up ahead and had the Tang dynasty ballistae attack Governor Osman. His expression was cold and aloof, his eyes devoid of emotion. The battlefield was constantly changing, and the situation was extremely complex. More importantly, Osman had relied on his formidable strength to break into the 9-dragon blood war banner. He was surrounded by Tang soldiers, and at such a close distance, recklessly using the Tang ballistae would not only fail to kill his foe, but also wound his own men. A normal person would never have dared to use the Tang dynasty ballistae at a time like this. But not only had Su Hanshan used them, he had done so without the slightest hesitation. Seeking death. As the Tang dynasty ballistae howled toward him, Osman's eyes turned cold and callous. Osman made no attempt to dodge Su Hanshan's ballistae, choosing to meet them head-on. Boom! An enormous energy exploded from Osman's body. The invincible Tang dynasty ballistae, which had the ability to pierce through stellar energy, were actually sent flying by the tyrannical energy in Osman's body. Su Hanshan couldn't help but grimace at the sight of all the ballistae being sent flying by Osman. But at this moment it was too late for Su Hanshan to do anything. Osman had already succeeded in breaking through the heavy defenses and was only several zhang from the black armored guard. For someone of Su Hanshan's cultivation level to be able to launch a round of attacks against this top-class imperial great general was already quite impressive. A second round of attacks was impossible. Now, hand over the war banner and die for me. Finally arriving in front of the black armored guard, Osman revealed a grim smile as he looked at the flag bearer in the middle of the formation corps. It was as if he had seen prey stretching out its neck for slaughter. Boom! A black sphere of light flashed from Osman's fingertip, instantly expanding 100-fold. It covered the sky and the earth as it shot towards the black armored guard with the flag in his right hand. Wonderful! At this moment, time seemed to stop. All the Arab soldiers, including Daluan Ruozan, Huishu Wazang, Dusong Mengpoj, and even Abu Muslim, seemed to relax. Although the process had been full of twists and turns, they had ultimately succeeded in their goal. With Osman's cultivation, being able to get so close to him was almost certain death. It was over. As long as they seized that war banner, the Tang dynasty would no longer be able to resist the combined assault of the Arabs, Uzan, and Western Turks. As Daluan Ruozan stood beneath the banner of the Uzan White Yak, this thought flitted through his mind. He had already thrown the matter of Dawusali to the back of his mind. He only knew one thing. The war was about to reverse. The moment Osman succeeded would also be the moment the Tang dynasty would crumble. While the Arabs, Western Turks, and Uzan were reinvigorated, the Tang dynasty was in a completely different situation. Not good. The Nine-Dragon Blood War banner is about to be broken. Hurry and save General Li. As the Tang soldiers stared at the insignificant black armored guard in the distance, they were like a drop in the ocean under Osman's heaven-shaking attack. All the Tang soldiers began to panic, their faces contorted in fear. Chapter 1126. Nay. In the distance, Wang Chong and the white-hoofed shadow had been fiercely battling with Ibak, but at this moment, they suddenly turned around and began to charge toward the Nine-Dragon Blood War banner. Gao Xianji, Qing Qianli, and even the chief of Wushang were doing all they could to stop Osman. But it was too late. No matter what they did, it was too late. The atmosphere on the battlefield was extremely tense at this moment. Just when the black armored guard was about to die to Osman's palm, something completely unexpected occurred. Barbarian of the western regions, you overestimate your strength. In the blink of an eye, just when Osman thought that victory was within his grasp, a deep and emotionless voice suddenly rang out in his ear. The black armored guard had been standing motionlessly. But at this moment, he suddenly raised his head and stared at Osman. An indescribable feeling surged through his heart. Someone of Osman's cultivation level would never be able to raise their head while he was attacking from such a short distance. This is impossible. Osman inwardly roared. An intense sense of danger welled up in his heart. Bang! Right at this moment, a light flashed and a palm suddenly stretched out. This palm shattered Osman's torrent of energy and slammed into Osman's chest. The power was so great that Osman felt as if the entire world had lost its splendor in that instant. Everything in the world seemed insignificant in the face of this palm. Kacha! In that instant, time seemed to slow down countless times. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a piece of flint, Osman heard a crisp sound come from his chest. The Nile war armor that he had spent tremendous effort, resources, and countless promises to obtain from a member of the imperial household had instantly shattered. Not even the combined efforts of 3 great generals of the Sassanid dynasty could shatter it, but this black-armored guard of the Tang dynasty couldn't even last a single palm. Pooh! In an instant, Osman's entire body shook and he immediately vomited a mouthful of blood. After which, he was ruthlessly sent flying by an unstoppable force that was as great as a mountain and an ocean before smashing into the ground. Boom! The ground was like paper, instantly shattering, collapsing, sinking, and exploding. Boulders the size of millstones were sent flying by the force of Osman's fall. Before it could fly far, it exploded again in the air, turning into hundreds and thousands of tiny gravel. Smoke and dust billowed throughout the entire battlefield. Under the gazes of countless people, Osman's armor was shattered. Fragments of his armor were scattered all over the battlefield, and Osman's body was drenched in blood. Pooh! Osman crawled up from the ground. Before he could say anything, his body trembled, and in the blink of an eye, he spat out another mouthful of blood. His originally resolute face instantly became as pale as a sheet of paper. Shocking! Everyone on the battlefield who saw this scene was shocked to the extreme. That unremarkable black-armored guard at the center of the formation was actually able to heavily injure Osman with a single palm strike. This completely overturned everyone's understanding of the world. This was something that no one had ever expected. This is impossible. At this moment, no one was more shocked than Abu Muslim. His fingers were clenched so tightly that they felt like his bones were about to shatter. As Osman's comrade in arms, Abu Muslim was well aware of his strength. He didn't dare to believe that Osman could be heavily injured by a single palm. The distant Daluan Ruozan was also stunned. The moment Osman had been sent flying, Daluan Ruozan's heart had turned cold, as if he had been the one being sent flying, not Osman. Imperial Great General. They actually sent an Imperial Great General to be the banner-bearer of the 9-Dragon Blood War banner. Daluan Ruozan's lips were trembling, his mind in disarray. Qutayba had fought against that mysterious old man, Abu Muslim had drawn away Gao Xianji, Ziyad had drawn away Qing Qianli, Huishu Wuzong had drawn away Wang Yan. In the end, Governor Osman had come alone, beheaded the banner-bearer, and broken the 9-Dragon Blood War formation. In Daluan Ruozan's plan, everything had gone smoothly. However, he had never expected that the final variable would be the black-armored guard holding the flag. This ordinary-looking flag-bearer was actually stronger than Governor Osman of Cairo. Deathly stillness. For a moment, the entire battlefield was silent. Everyone was so shocked by this sight that they couldn't speak. Even Wang Chon was flabbergasted, let alone the others. Hand over your life. A voice shattered the silence. At this moment, the only person on the battlefield who was not affected was the black-armored guard himself. Boom! The black-armored guard stepped forward, his eyes locking onto the distant Osman. But before he could attack, there was an explosion of bloody light as Osman's energy swelled. The black-armored guard narrowed his eyes and prepared to receive Osman's counterattack, but what happened next took him by complete surprise. Just who are you? Go! Osman's first words were directed at the black-armored guard. However, as soon as he said run, he turned into a streak of bloody light and fled like a stray dog at an astonishing speed. Humph! Blood escape art. The black-armored guard's eyes flashed with cold light, but he immediately stopped and did not pursue Osman. There were many secret arts in this world that could stimulate one's potential and raise one's strength for a short period of time, just like the blood escape art of the sections. Osman was definitely not using the blood escape art, but there was no question that it was also a method to stimulate one's potential. I'll let you go for now, but will you still be able to enter the field in the next battle? The black-armored guard's eyes flashed as he looked away from Osman. His breathing was long and steady as if he had not been affected in the slightest. He continued to hold the banner in the center of the 9-dragon blood battle formation. To the bearer of the 9-dragon blood war banner, the most important thing was never to kill the enemy, but to wield the banner. As long as the banner existed, the man would exist. If the banner died, the man would die. This was the belief and rule that the Black Armored Guard had upheld for generations. As Osman fled, the entire battlefield came to its senses. In a flash, all the Tang dynasty soldiers exploded with cheers. Kill! Kill these Arabs! Charge! Kill them all! No one had expected the Black Armored Guard to wield the banner to be so powerful. The Tang dynasty had actually hidden another imperial great general, one even stronger than Osman. In a flash, the Tang dynasty's morale soared. The countless Tang dynasty soldiers, along with the more than 20,000 soldiers of the Divine Martial Army, Divine Prison Army, Roaring Tiger Army, all charged toward the Arabs. Load. Ready. Release. Energized, Su Hanshan began to issue a string of orders. The 5,000 Tang dynasty ballistae worked with the 9-dragon blood formation to rapidly advance toward the Arabs, the Western Turks, and the Uzan. More and more soldiers left the first defense line and entered the fierce battlefield. This time, the Tang dynasty no longer needed to rely on the defense line. All its soldiers had gathered together into a massive system and were launching an all-out assault on the Arabs for the first time. Plush plush plush. Arrows rained down, piercing through the bodies of Arab soldiers and causing blood to gush onto the ground. Panicked Arab corpses piled on top of each other, thud 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 as they toppled to the ground. Kill. On the entire battlefield, the most lethal force was still the 9-dragon blood formation. Clang clang clang. Countless halos vibrated under the effect of the 9-dragon blood war banner. The Tongluo Grand Halo, the Xuanwu Halo, the Dragon Stallion Halo, the Divine Prison Halo, the Divine Martial Halo, the Iron Wall Halo, the Azure Martial Halo, the total of 9 dazzling war halos appeared on the 20,000-some elite Tang cavalry. At this moment, this army had become the most powerful force in the entire continent in the current world. Not even the strongest Arab army, the Revelation Army, was a match for them, much less anyone else. Go! Let's go! At this moment, the Arabs had truly been routed. Osman's heavy injury had dealt an unimaginable blow to their morale. They had originally believed that they had the advantage in terms of great generals, but now, all this advantage had been lost. The Tang dynasty had just as many great generals as the 3 great empires. Although the Arabs, Uzan, and Western Turks still had the advantage in numbers, the entire army had lost all courage to fight. All the Arab soldiers began to flee at the sight of that ancient war banner that was tinged with black at the center of the red banner. Retreat! Retreat! Everyone, retreat! Abu Muslim roared. His furious, unwilling, and helpless voice resounded over the battlefield. Abu Muslim stood in the air, the eye of the demon god on his hands. His battle with Gao Xianji was still far from over. Although Gao Xianji had gotten much stronger, he still had not reached the level where he could defeat him. But even though the battle between the great generals had not yet been decided, Abu Muslim was still forced to order a retreat. Boom! In the blink of an eye, a horn suddenly blared from the rear of the Arab army. But compared to the loud and passionate call of the attack, this horn was now tinged with panic. Rumble! In an instant, smoke and dust billowed, and the entire army retreated even faster. And this was not the only effect on the other sides of the battlefield. Ziad, Ibak, Huishu Wazang, and Dusong Mengpoj began to retreat, no longer in the mood to continue fighting. In this battle, the greatest weakness of the Tang dynasty was the 9-dragon blood formation. As long as the banner at the center of the formation was destroyed, everything else would fall apart. However, the moment the black-armored flag-bearer made his move, all of these flaws immediately disappeared. Chapter 11:27. Let's go. In the air, Ziad threw out the ocean ring. Black energy rumbled as it slammed into the body of Cheng Qinli's supreme desolation god. Bang! It shattered the stellar energy chains that Cheng Qinli had thrown at it, and then it began to flee. Ziad had participated in many different battles, but this could be said to be the strangest battle he had ever fought. It had started extremely quickly and ended extremely quickly. Whoosh! Behind Ziad, Huishu Wuzong and Dusong Mengpoj also pushed back their opponents and fled like lightning bolts. At this moment, Abu Muslim, who had pushed back Gao Xianji with a punch, also began to flee. Boom boom boom. Just as he was retreating into the distance, he suddenly heard an earth-shattering boom. Even though the shockwave was several tens of thousands of feet away, it still blew towards him. Not good. Abu Muslim's heart trembled as he turned around. It's Qutayba. Even someone of Abu Muslim's cultivation level was alarmed by the intensity of the battle between these two energies. The only people on the battlefield who could give Abu Muslim this feeling were the governor of war and that mysterious elder. Abu Muslim suddenly turned his head. On the other end of the battlefield, he could see that a sandstorm with a radius of several dozen feet had soared into the sky, stretching for several hundred feet. This sandstorm was made up of countless rocks, dirt, warhorses, and the wreckage of countless soldiers. Torrents of energy spun rapidly in the void, whistling sharply. The momentum was incomparably terrifying. Bang! A pile of corpses was struck by the edge of the sandstorm and instantly torn to shreds, and then they were pulled into the surging storm to add to its momentum. In a flash, Abu Muslim's body went stiff, and he became motionless. Someone of Qutayba's personality would never retreat. Abu Muslim suddenly recalled Qutayba's order, those who retreat will die. On the first day of battle, Abu Muslim had blown the horn and forced Qutayba to retreat, but this could not be repeated. Given Qutayba's pride, he would never be able to accept retreating in front of the Tang people. More importantly, though Abu Muslim was the highest commander of the East, his orders had no effect on the soldiers under Qutayba's command. Not a single one of Qutayba's top-class armies, whether it was the Revelation Army, Death Army, or Blood Beast Army, had retreated, and many of them were still hesitating. To the current Arab army, this was absolutely fatal. This is troublesome. I can't retreat. If we don't convince Qutayba and retreat now, we'll be doomed. Almost at the same time, in the distance, Daluan Ruozen's eyelids twitched violently, and his face suddenly became gloomy. If Qutayba did not retreat and the others retreated, the three empires would suffer an unprecedented defeat. And if they ignored Qutayba and retreated, leading to some unpredictable result, the Tang dynasty would truly emerge victorious in this battle, and Arabia would have no chance of surviving. Boom! Just when Abu Muslim was prepared to issue the order to reinforce Qutayba, there was a massive boom. Under the gazes of the hundreds of thousands of soldiers on the battlefield, the huge sandstorm, that was dozens of meters tall, suddenly exploded violently. Two unimaginably huge forces collided violently inside. With a "kacha" sound, the huge sandstorm was torn into two. Bang! Bang! Two figures, one gold and one black, appeared in the center of the sandstorm. That golden figure that seemed like a god to them was thrown more than 100 feet by this enormous energy. Clack! The golden helmet that had accompanied Qutayba for more than 10 years flew out of his head, shattering into countless cracks in the air. When it fell to the ground, the helmet had completely caved in. Without the protection of the helmet, Qutayba's hair was in complete disarray. Everyone was in an uproar at this sight. The Arab cavalry stared with wide eyes in disbelief. In their minds, Qutayba had always been strong, confident, and possessed the power to crush all. No one could make him retreat, which was why many of them had not retreated. All of Arabia, including Abu Muslim's subordinates, had Qutayba as fans. He was the true war god of Arabia, but in all their years of battle, they had never seen Qutayba in such a sorry state. Impossible. This is impossible. There's no one in this world that can defeat my lord. No one was more shocked than the army that Qutayba had brought from the north. The sight of Qutayba's helmet in disarray and his hair in disarray was like a tsunami in everyone's mind. At this moment, Abu Muslim, Ibak, Ziyad, Huishu Huaitsang, and the others were just as shocked as the other soldiers. How could this be? Abu Muslim muttered to himself. The closer one was to Qutayba, the more they understood just how powerful he was, and the more stunned they were by this sight. Abu Muslim almost subconsciously turned his head to look across from Qutayba. That mysterious black-clothed elder was floating in the air, his hair in disarray and his face pale. It seemed like his injuries were no less severe than Qutayba's. Who dares to retreat? In the time it takes for a spark to fly off a flint, an extremely cold voice sounded in his ears. Qutayba stared at the evil emperor, his eyes vicious and his hair in disarray, the killing intent in his heart only rising. Bzzz. The space in a radius of 100 feet began to twist, making everything blurry and indistinct. Old thing, you've angered me. Qutayba fiercely glared at the evil emperor. In his life, no one had ever been able to force him to such a state. Even Abu Muslim had to lower his head in front of him and endure. For the first time, Qutayba was determined to kill this Eastern elder he had never seen before and even spoke a different language. Barbarians of the Western regions, do you really think that no one can subdue you? The evil emperor's expression was cold and aloof, and though his face was pale, he showed no signs of yielding. In that battle just now, both he and Qutayba had been evenly matched, with neither gaining the upper hand. Master! At this moment, a concerned shout came from the distance. Wang Chong, riding on the white-hoofed shadow, looked at the distant evil emperor with concern in his eyes. Although Qutayba was in a sorry state, his master, the evil emperor, was not in a good condition. In Wang Chong's mind, the evil emperor held an unparalleled status. Deep within, Wang Chong did not wish for any harm to befall him. Lord Gao, General Cheng, Father, Village Chief, General Li. Everyone, attack together and kill Qutayba. Wang Chong's voice resounded through the sky. With these words, Wang Chong and his 7,000 Wuxian cavalry charged at Qutayba, abandoning the three main forces behind them. At almost the same time, Gao Xianji, Qing Qianli, Wang Yan, chief of Wuxiang, and even the black armored guard maintaining the 9-dragon blood war banner charged at Qutayba. As long as they killed Qutayba, this battle would be won. Wang Chong leaned against his horse, his eyes blazing with a light even brighter than the sun. The central figure in this battle was Qutayba. Once Qutayba was killed, the Arab army would no longer have the strength to reverse the situation. The sound of hooves galloping could be heard. The situation of the entire battlefield rapidly changed. It instantly became incomparably tense, more dangerous than ever before. Bang! A black boot that was twice the size of an ordinary man's boot stomped forward. The primary duty of the banner holder was to protect the banner, but as long as this did not violate their own objectives, they could also participate in the fierce battle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 enormous consciousnesses of the great general level flew through the air and locked onto Qutayba. At this moment, even Qutayba couldn't help but grimace. If they were just ordinary great generals, Qutayba would have been able to deal with them alone. Other than Qing Qianli and the others, Qutayba could ignore them, but including the demonic emperor old man, Qutayba sensed three existences that posed a powerful threat to him. Let's go! Abu Muslim roared, his face fraught with worry. In the current situation, Osman was heavily injured and could no longer participate in the battle. Once the battle began, Abu Muslim was not confident that he could defeat the Tang people without a great general. Qutayba remained motionless as he watched the powerful auras rapidly approach him, all of which were as vast as mountains and seas. As the proud Arab war god, it was no easy task for him to make Qutayba retreat. Hurry and go. Abu Muslim was burning with anxiety. If he missed this opportunity, he really wouldn't be able to leave. Brother Wenfu, I've come to help you. At this moment, an elderly voice spoke. The chief of Wuxiang was the closest, so he was the first to arrive. Rumble. In a flash of light and a fierce gale, countless strands of origin energy began to gather in a radius of 100 li around the chief of Wuxiang. And in the center of this origin energy, a massive azure hand the size of a mountain shot through the air toward Kateba. Buzz. Kateba grimaced at this sight. The chief of Wuxiang had used a technique that was 70 to 80% similar to the evil emperor's. Just like him, the two of them had vaguely touched upon that level of existence. Kateba would never retreat against the evil emperor. But with the addition of the chief of Wuxiang, everything was different. Bang! A vast and majestic beam of golden sword chi flew through the air toward the massive azure hand that the chief of Wuxiang had unleashed. At almost the same time, the surrounding origin energy converged into a massive mountain fist that rumbled toward Kateba. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.